Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у щах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страны.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. І хто води всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1107 of the War News Stream. And today we have massive news out of Syria that there are massive heavy battles underway as Syria devolves into chaos as these forces roll in and start causing chaos pretty much across the entire country of Syria in a big move. And also, we've seen a full-scale Ukrainian drone attack on Russia today, resulting in significant damage. And also, U.S. officials were caught holding talks with Zelensky's political rivals, and it was outed today. And it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as we have now been able to hear that civil war has now broken out again only months after the Syrian civil war. The original Syrian civil war from 2011 up until 2014 ended with the ousting of Bashar al-Assad from power and the bringing in of a Syrian interim government. It now appears that an Iranian-backed pro-Assad militia has now declared war against the Syrian interim government and is conducting heavy battles throughout the areas of Latakia and Tartus, and simultaneously the Druze population of southwestern Syria have now declared open rebellion against Chelani and the interim government and are now preparing to mobilize a national army of their own to fight against the leader of the Syrian interim government, Chelani. At this very moment, we've also been able to hear that Turkish armed forces are beginning to enter the northern area of Syria rapidly to attempt to stabilize the situation, or at least create a sanitary zone near to the Turkish border as the country once again descends into absolute chaos, practically on the flip of a dime. We have also been able to hear in other news around the world that the state of Ukraine has been able to push the Russian Federation back again inside the areas of Pokrovsk and Toretsk, as we were able to see that the Ukrainian armed forces have successfully continued their offensives within these directions and are continuing to encircle the Russian Federation's armed forces within the city of Toretsk. And we've also been able to hear major news from Pokrovsk, as it appears that the Ukrainian armed forces are continuing to push back the Russians in multiple directions away from the city. Not only that, we've even been able to see that limited counteroffensives have been conducted by Ukrainian armed forces within the town of Chasiv Yar, retaking several city blocks and once again putting the Russians on the defensive within that area. At the exact same time today, we were able to hear that several Ukrainian ministers, those of the leader of the Ukrainian opposition, meaning the political parties not aligned with President Zelensky, as well as other members or former members of the Ukrainian government, including Petro Poroshenko, have come out today and stated that the United States government and officials representing United States interests have come forward and requested that these government officials practically conduct unconstitutional and illegal acts inside of Ukraine in an attempt to overthrow President Volodymyr Zelensky from power in wartime, although such actions cannot be made legally under the Constitution of the state of Ukraine. We have a massive amount of news to cover today, and we also have some fairly significant news coming from other areas around the world. But most of our focus tonight, just to let y'all know, will be entirely on the Syrian situation as well as the war in Ukraine. There were some other developments inside of Finland with the Finnish-US joint military exercise today inside of Finnish territory, and we were also able to hear that apparently the Chinese have launched around 11 balloons over the island of Taiwan, and the Republic of China's Air Force is currently monitoring and surveying the balloons and possibly considering shooting down the balloons that are currently flying near to or over their island, at least at this point. There is an unbelievable amount of news today. It's actually an incredibly large amount, and every time I get done telling y'all it was a huge amount of news, I remember a whole lot more than I'm actually supposed to be covering with all of y'all tonight. But we will get into all of it with due time. But we are going to be moving on into Syria for the first part of the news segment tonight, because the devolving of the Syrian situation into the outbreak of a second civil war has actually been completely unforeseen by everyone. The world was taken by storm today and incredibly shocked to see that there are now massive clashes and battles happening throughout the entirety of western Syria at this point. The only place that we haven't seen any major battles at this point is around the city of Homs in Damascus, as it appears that every single group of people at the exact same time has now risen up in revolt against the Syrian interim government led by the Harir al-Tasham and also led by Jelani himself, who is the leader of the Harir al-Tasham. This is coming as an unbelievable shock because we only heard just about yesterday that the Iranians announced that they had created an Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps-backed group inside of the Syrian Arab Republic to possibly start to thwart Jelani's Syrian interim government plans, which was considered to be incredibly odd given the fact that it appears that Jelani and his government is leaning more towards being pro-Iranian and pro-Russian than that of being pro-Western. And it was incredibly bizarre to see that the Iranians would raise up a terrorist organization for the large part to fight against an Iranian-aligned terrorist organization. Well, I don't know what is going on with that. We didn't know what was going on with that yesterday, but it appears that that was just the case today, as we have been able to see videos of major firefights now occurring quite literally everywhere throughout the populated areas of western Syria. This is one of our first clips that we got today, showing the outbreaks of firefights in the middle of the night as the rebel forces and the interim government forces began to clash practically everywhere around the country. Of course,
honestly, this right here is a very, very weak resistance. Honestly, like I'm not sure if they're going to make it.
Well, I don't believe that was the resistance. I think that was the interim government's forces.
That was a joke.
I was about to say, well, I mean, at this point, we're the analysis side of things. I was like, I don't really know what to do with that one. But we can also see another form of a firefight, if you want to call it that. And I don't know exactly whose forces these are. These may be interim government forces, or they may be rebel forces, but they're firing into some sort of an apartment building within the center of one of the cities near to Latakia or Tartus. It may actually be in Latakia or Tartus. We didn't really get a good location for this clip, as they set the building alight, pretty much torched the building, and then started firing into it, possibly trying to hit someone who was inside. We don't really know exactly what the reason was for this or the target, but still, it was a little bit of an interesting move. We see them firing into practically every single level of the building as civilians and rebels possibly continue to fire into the building.
Jeez, did you hear that? It sounded like a ricochet or something coming back over the camera. Either somebody shooting near the cameraman, one or the other, like near his head or something.
Let's see, where was that? Was it somewhere around here?
I heard a bullet go right by the mic. Like it sounded like that little whizzing sound going right past near the beginning.
I actually didn't hear that, but still, the firefight was intense. And moving on from that clip, once again, I'm trying to knock out our location unknown clips the best we can. We are going to start moving, however, into the actual populated areas where we do know that firefights and heavy battles are currently being waged right now between the rebel forces and the Syrian interim government's forces at this point. In the city of Tartus, we were able to see that firefights began to break out throughout the entirety of the city. We can see a firefight happening right there, somewhere near to one of the southern sides of the city. Moving on from that clip, the only clip that we got so far from the city of Tartus, and moving on up into Latakia, we start to see that incredibly heavy battles were being waged inside of the city of Latakia. Really quickly, to actually show y'all something that's a little bit important before we get into the actual clips and the overall analysis of the situation, is the Syrian population density map, because this is one that will start to become a little bit more important, at least as we continue to talk about our analysis of the current goings-on inside of the regions of Syria that we're talking about right now. This is a population map of the Syrian Arab Republic, or as we would currently call it right now, the Syrian interim government, and you can see that the areas in red are the most populated regions of the country, the areas in orange are fairly populated, and the areas in light straw yellow are practically unpopulated, and there's really no one living within those areas for the large part. I'm going to just leave that there and let y'all stew on that for a second while we move on into Latakia, and we show you all of the footage that is coming out from the city of Latakia at this point. But moving on into the major city of Latakia, we were able to see that an even heavier battle was being waged, at least inside of the city. As far as we can understand, the heaviest and largest battle that's currently being conducted at the very opening phase of the Second Civil War is inside of the city of Latakia, making us assume that this most likely will become a hotbed for rebel activity against the Syrian interim government and may actually be secured and controlled by these rebel forces here incredibly soon, as it appears that the situation is entirely uncontrolled by the Syrian interim government within the city, and the rebel forces are beginning to rapidly make ground inside of the town, or largely the city, and are beginning to control large swaths of it, even at this moment from what we're hearing right now.
Bro, they're even saying that over the speaker. They're yelling it in person and on the speaker.
Man, this guy sounds wasted, though, man. He's like, and it's like...
The mic is not supposed to go in thy mouth. It's supposed to be outside of thy mouth.
Dude, he said, "Can you hear me better now?" And then he started... As you all know, every firefight inside of Syria, that phrase must be repeated every single free second of air. He's still going. And now the first shot was fired.
I'm just saying that would piss me off. Like, no matter whose side I was on out there, I'd be like, dude, can you just shut up already?
Dude, I'd have to whip out, like, the Mel Blanc yell, "Quiet!" or something like that, like, eventually. It's been, like, a whole minute, and it's still going on. I cannot believe this, honestly. I feel like this guy ought to be getting, like, carpal tunnel syndrome before his jaw muscles, doing that this many times. Oh, my God. For some reason, it sounds like he's fading into the distance right there. We're going to skip forward.
Oh my God, he's still going.
And we're going to skip forward a little bit more.
Oh my God.
So now we can finally hear the firefight started a little bit in the background. He's still going. And the clip ended.
Dude, his vocal cords are freaking MVP. Like, you know, who cares what he's saying? That dude, to keep that up for that long, yelling and screaming like that dude's got some vocal cords on him.
Oh, dude, like, it's actually insane. Like, oh, he just wouldn't stop. Like, honestly, like, the firefight sounds hardly even were in the video. It was pretty much just that one guy. Dude, you know, people are absolutely busting it down in the street to that guy. Like, they're making rap beats and stuff. But anyways, moving on from that into our next clip, we were able to see one of the rebels firing an RPG inside of Latakia right here. And there it goes.
Oh my God.
This is going to get very repetitive very quickly, but moving on from that and on to our next clip, we were also able to hear reinforcements were being sent in as the intense clashes with former Syrian Arab army cells were beginning to break out inside of Latakia. However, one thing I do want to say is that while open source intel does say that this is former cells of the Syrian Arab army, we're not entirely sure about that, at least at this point, as it does appear that there may be multiple actors involved, and it may be an incredibly loose coalition of anti-Harir al-Tasham forces that are conducting this rebellion, and so there may be some former members of the Syrian Arab army involved, but there also may be other members involved that have no affiliation at all to the Syrian Arab army, and we actually were able to see that there appears to be a larger rebel force out there after this publication was made by open source intel. But here's the clip. When you see the reinforcements being brought in, it is the police.
That's a lot of guys being brought in. They think it's pretty serious, apparently.
You know, I'm pretty shocked. You know, I was actually expecting something completely different of Syrian police sirens.
Yeah, really, it sounds kind of American, or at least, you know, vaguely American.
Yeah, I mean, I was at least expecting that to just be some guy leaning out the window yelling, "Oh no!" like something like that, like the whole way down, because that's almost what's happening in every clip at this point. But we were able to see that there is a likely suspect or a culprit, if we want to claim that there is one, for the current rebellion that's now once again breaking out inside of Syria, as we were able to see that a declaration was made today amidst the ongoing operations in the Latakia governorate, an amalgamation of pro-Assad regime and Iran-backed insurgent groups is now calling itself the Military Council for the Liberation of Syria. Wow, that doesn't sound anything new at all. That's like the name of every single military group involved in the first Syrian civil war. They are also reportedly led by Qa'ith Suleiman Dala, who is the former commander of the now-defunct Syrian Arab Army's 4th Division. The elite division, mind you, that literally broke apart and ran away before Jelani's men even made it to Damascus. This would not be the first such group, but appears to be the most prominent at the time. We actually got to see their publication right here. They put out a manifesto, and of course we have to read the manifesto to see exactly what they're saying. Let's see. It starts off with, al-Hasekari is forbidden. All right, well, we are now knowing that apparently they're already laying down the law. But nevertheless, a statement on the establishment and the launch of a military council for the liberation of Syria. O sons of the noble Syrian people, O our valiant soldiers who have swallowed their anger after months of injustice, oppression, kidnapping, and physical liquidation based on an ethnic or religious ideological view, and after the extremist jihadist terrorist regime that seized their country with the support of foreign powers, which did not happen, and is currently implementing a de facto policy without legal or constitutional justification, has failed and has been completely unable to protect the country and its citizens, and the security, economic, and humanitarian conditions have deteriorated to unprecedented levels in the country's history. And after our land has been violated by foreign powers, where do they put a period in here? Like, I've read like a paragraph so far, there has not been a period. We, the leaders of the Syrian National Armed Forces, announced the establishment of a military council to liberate Syria. And this council represents the will of the free national Syrian people and aims to achieve the following objectives: liberating all Syrian territory from all occupying and terrorist forces, overthrowing the extremist regime and dismantling its abhorrent sectarian oppressive apparatus, protecting the lives and property of Syrian citizens, rebuilding state institutions on national and democratic foundations, preparing conditions for the return of refugees and displaced persons to their homes. I thought Assad was really like the main reason why there were refugees, but I desist. Establishing a unified sovereign Syrian state that respects human rights and guarantees justice and equality for all its citizens. Finally, there is a period. We assure our people that we are not seeking power, Well, wouldn't that be what you're doing? I mean, you're trying to overthrow the other guy to take power. And then our only goal is to liberate Syria and build a better future for its people by plunging our nation that's been civil war ridden for 10 years back into another civil war. We call on all the Syrian people from different sects, religions, and ethnicities to join our ranks and stand with us in this historical stage. We call on the international community to support the will of the Syrian people to liberate themselves from injustice and tyranny, disguised in vague terms, and to stand by us in achieving our noble goals. We believe that victory is ours, and that Syria will return free and proud, enjoying security, stability, and prosperity. And
They don't really believe in necessarily giving specifics, because what exactly are they claiming that Jelani's interim government has done that's so heinous? They're just very general and very vague. It sounds good on paper, but it's like they're not saying what's causing them to say this stuff right here. And once again, they've only been there for a couple of months. They've literally just arrived. So to say all this that quickly, it's like surely he hasn't had enough time to even pull any of this off.
yeah, I mean, it's just ridiculous. Also, by the way, everyone, just to remind y'all, this little manifesto or declaration here was written by the same people who were a part of the Syrian Arab army that were conducting untold atrocities against the Syrian people, and not only that, ran the atrocious Sednaya prison outside of Damascus that was practically Syria's version of Auschwitz. It's pretty ridiculous that these people are trying to make themselves out to be the liberators of the Syrian people, because honestly, if what they were saying about Jelani was true, then they're really not that different. I mean, they're almost the exact same. It's not like the Assads were innocent angels. They conducted untold atrocities against the Syrian people on a near annual basis. So it's just really ridiculous that that is the case, and that's what they're trying to make themselves out to be. But the situation is devolving so rapidly that Turkish armed forces are now forcibly entering the country and making their way into the areas of northern Syria. We can see this in this clip right here as Turkish Kirpi armored cars make their way into the northern area near to the city of Idlib in Syria.
How big of a deal is that? It seems like it's a pretty big deal.
It's a fairly big deal. It is showing that the Turks are now apparently not even counting on Jelani to hold the territory he currently has right now, because crazily enough, Idlib and the area that they're currently entering into right now is literally the birthplace of Jelani's Harir al-Tasham, largely showing that they've even lost faith in Jelani as well, and now they're sweeping in to try and once again expand their area of control, the sanitary zones that we have outlined in green up here, everything above the green lines north as a part of the Turkish control areas, and it appears that they're now going to be expanding that even farther. Now, a lot of people may be wondering how serious this kind of a rebellion is. Is this really more of a rebellion or an open civil war that will be created here? It is more so of a civil war than a rebellion at this point, generally because of where it's happening. And that's why the population density map that I was pulling up earlier becomes incredibly important. The population density map largely shows us whether these people have any kind of public backing or not, or whether they're going to be taking over areas that have any kind of large significance, at least in the terms of power projection that any rebel force would be able to have if they controlled a specific area. Largely, as far as any group is concerned, controlling the northeastern area of the country where the majority of the population lives is one of the top priorities for any group if they want to maintain control over the Syrian Arab Republic or whatever remains of it that's left. And at this moment, understanding that there are firefights happening from Latakia to Tartus, most of the major population center of Syria itself is currently embroiled or being contested by rebel forces at this point, meaning that this isn't a small rebellion. This is actually an incredibly serious issue, because we could see that these rebels begin to take control rapidly of the major population areas and largely push Jelani's forces, the Harir al-Tasham, or the interim government forces, if you want to call them that, out into the largely unpopulated desert where they do not have a manpower pool to work from, or much less an industrial base to work from either. Also, on top of that, most of the military supplies and equipment that is left after the Israelis bombed it into oblivion is largely inside of western Syria, meaning that if you do take over that area, even if it is a rebel force, you are largely the one that is leveraging and weighing most of the control of the country in your hands. A lot of people have been saying a lot of things about this at this point, and I gotta say that this actually was a bit of a surprise, because nobody actually expected that the Syrian interim government was that unstable to the point that we were going to see that the region would go right back into civil war right after a civil war ended. And a lot of people are wondering what is going to be happening here in the future, or at least what Syria is going to be looking like now. And a lot of people are saying that the rebels will not defeat Jelani's government. There seems to be a very small amount of people who are saying that. It appears that the large majority are believing that the Jelani government, or the Syrian interim government, will largely be able to defend itself from this new civil war that has been created. Others are saying that it seems like a 50-50 chance that this may end up being successful for the rebels, or that Jelani may be able to defend himself successfully and crush the insurrection or the rebel uprising that's happening. And many people are unsure and undecided, considering that this is something that appears to have been done on the spur of the moment and appears to be incredibly widespread, but at the same time, we really don't know a lot about these rebel forces or the kind of backing supplies and equipment that they have, either provided by the Iranians or that they were able to scrounge up themselves inside of the heavily disorganized Syria that's existed since the end of the Civil War. So, Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So it looks like the audience is pretty much all over the place in this poll. This poll is very, very much varied across the answers. It looks like 33% said the Jelani government, the current government, will defend itself successfully from these rebels, while 26% said it seems like a 50-50 chance that it might fall, and 17% said the rebels will defeat the current Jelani government. And it's really hard to tell, to be honest. Like the enforcer was saying, this current government has only been there for a few months. So for it to devolve into chaos this fast, that is not a good sign for stability for Syria. And honestly, in my opinion, I would say that Syria is probably about to be plunged into a very, very dark hole here when it comes to another issue with the civil war situation breaking out. So it looks like these are heavy firefights. These are not small skirmishes like we've seen in southern Iran. These are really, really big firefights inside of Syria. And once again, Turkey has crossed the border because they are so worried that this is about to get out of hand. So I'm going to say it's a 50-50 chance. It looks like they could hold out, but I'm not really sure because it looks like there's a lot of Iranian backing to these current forces, which are going up against the Jelani government. So Syria is going to be in for a rough couple of months, probably, would be my guess. This is going to be a pretty big one. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that, in my opinion, I largely would believe that the Syrian interim government may be in some significant trouble at this point, considering that the rebellions are happening in the major populated settlements of the Syrian interim government at this point. Latakia, Tartus, and not only that, we haven't even gotten to this yet, southwestern Syria, southwest of Damascus, all appear to be in open rebellion against the Jelani government, meaning that really the only place that is left under the Jelani government's control is the city of Homs and Damascus without question. We currently don't have enough information about the city of Aleppo and the current condition of the city to really know if there's any major firefights or open rebellions that are happening there, but considering that open rebellions and firefights are widespread throughout the area of the Syrian coastline and also a little bit deeper in towards Hama, we would generally assume that there probably is some sort of rebel activity that's currently also happening in Aleppo as well, meaning that the amount of control that Jelani currently has over the territory of Syria is about as limited as Bashar al-Assad's was in his final day before he fled the Syrian Arab Republic and then went to live in exile inside the Russian Federation, meaning that really only the city of Homs and Damascus are currently under his control. And not only that, due to the religious and ideological differences in between the two cities, their current hold on Homs may be highly questionable. The city of Homs actually has a significant Christian population inside of it, and considering that we have seen that Jelani has started to bring forward a more so Islamic Republic-style form of a government, that may see that the loyalty of the city of Homs is very questionable and shaky, and that Homs may try and align itself with any other kind of a faction that largely protects some sort of religious ideologies across the board, instead of really looking for some sort of a religiously centric or secular form of a state like Jelani and the Syrian interim government appear to be moving towards at this point. So that may even cut down Jelani's actual control of the situation much farther and really leave him only with Damascus, and even still, the situation is devolving wildly out of control throughout the remainder of the populated areas of the Syrian Arab Republic, which we're largely going to call it for simplicity's sake, because saying the interim government and then trying to, explain all that, it's getting a little bit complicated at this point. But beyond that, I would have to say,
isn't it just crazy? Isn't it just crazy how quick tables can turn like this? Because just a couple of months ago, Jelani was the rebel forces. He was the rebel going in and taking down Assad. And now he's basically in Assad's position now, and there's a new group of rebels coming after him. So now he's experiencing what it was like to be Assad. And honestly, I'll say this once again: Jelani was appearing to go pro-Western at first, and then he really started getting real shaky, and now he's sort of leaning back toward the Russian sphere. But at the same time, though, Jelani seems to have gone somewhat against Russia yet again, because they're currently negotiating, the Jelani government is, with Russia for basically letting Russia take their bases back over. And right now, those negotiations are sort of like playing out not so great, actually, between the Russians and the Jelani government. So it sounds like with these pro-Iranian-backed forces sort of coming in and sort of causing this new issue, I wonder if Russia has any hand in that and sort of putting pressure on Jelani by having Iran send in these forces and agitate inside of Syria to cause a bigger issue. It seems like it could be connected.
I would have to say it does seem like it could possibly be connected, but what is interesting about this is, at least at this point, from what we're understanding, Jelani was moving the Syrian interim government into becoming more Iranian-aligned than anything. Not really Russian-aligned per se. Those negotiations were falling apart, and it appears that they were still on very unfriendly terms, but Jelani was moving towards being a pro-Iranian, much like the Assad regime was. Then today we find out that most of the rebel forces that are now fighting against Jelani are Iranian-backed as well, and appear to have the blessing of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps to conduct this fight against Jelani's government, which isn't really making a lot of sense, to be entirely honest with y'all, because we have Jelani and the Syrian interim government, which are largely Iranian-aligned or Iranian-leaning at this point at a minimum, now being fought by an Iranian-backed pro-Iranian rebel force. So it's really like, what is the point to this rebellion? Because it almost seemed like they were already moving towards being pro-Iranian already, and that's what we were hearing and seeing publicly, and now we're seeing that the Iranians are overthrowing a pro-Iranian with pro-Iranians. It's just incredibly confusing at this point what's actually happening inside of the region, but one thing that we do know without a shadow of a doubt is that it isn't really just pro-Iranian-backed groups that appear to be rebelling. It also appears that other groups are rebelling with their own self-interest in mind. To make out Syria to be a homogenous bulk is something that a lot of people misunderstand greatly. Syria is actually a varied landscape of different peoples and cultures that largely all exist within the same country, but it is incredibly different as far as religious and cultural breakdowns. And let me go see if I can get y'all a religious map of Syria and show y'all the different religious sects that exist within the country. And let me see right here if I can get this for y'all. At least this one shows different ethnic groups, and you can get a fairly good idea here from this map that while there are larger Sunni Arab groups that exist throughout most of Syria, there are also some incredibly larger groups of different Syrian cultures that exist throughout the country. And this means that Syria isn't exactly a homogenous nation like others have been throughout history. For example, a great example of a homogenous country would actually be Germany. Germany largely was formed out of the princely states of the Holy Roman Empire, but all of those princely states were easily unified because they shared a common culture and language that was almost universal throughout this area of Central Europe. And for this reason, it's been incredibly easy over the past several hundred years for Germany to unify into a united nation for that reason. And you largely would find, at least before the modern day with mass immigration and migration and such things, that Germany was incredibly, except for the religious differences in between Protestants and Catholics, as far as culturally, they were incredibly similar across the board, almost identical for the large part, and that's why the nation of Germany has largely been fairly stable, is because almost everyone culturally is on the exact same page. There's a major difference with that, however, in Syria. It is just such a varied country. Kurds in the northeast, we also have Sunni Arabs that make up a majority of the population in places like Aleppo and Damascus. You also have Druze within the southwest of Syria. You also have entirely different groups along the coastline where there's another major population area. It is an incredibly varied landscape, and this creates a highly unstable country for the large part. Having multiple different major cultures within the country and attempting to force a government onto the entirety of the country that only supports one culture or one religious group will always lead to an incredibly great deal of strife and most likely conflict, as all of these groups attempt to try and assert themselves and make sure that their own individual rights and liberties are not stamped upon by a government that will only accept or approve of one specific culture and one specific religious group. And so we're not only seeing that this rebellion is pretty much just anti-Jelani, it appears that even the Druze rebels today have now declared that they're going to be forming a national army of their own, and they will now be conducting conflict against Jelani's government to make sure to protect their own rights from the radical Islamic government that Jelani appears to be trying to bring forward. We were able to see a couple of clips of this today within the southwestern area of Syria, south of Damascus, and near to the Israeli occupation zone at this point, in these clips right here. And moving on from that clip and into our next. And moving on from that clip and into our next one.
You know, real quick, I wonder if Israel was expecting it to devolve to this point, because obviously, I was just thinking the Druze are obviously Israeli backed. Like, there's obviously rumors that Netanyahu sort of like supports the Druze, and I think it's actually pretty much well known at this point the Druze are Israeli backed. So, you know, I wonder if the Israelis knew that it was about to devolve into so many different factions fighting for power, and the Druze were going to be another faction fighting for that power. It's just honestly a mess. Like, they got so many people fighting for their own things in Syria right now. Like, it's a total mess.
Yeah, it's a fairly significant mess at this point, especially because of how the interim government has been handling the situation. And of course, many of you all saw the other day how the situation is being handled. Entire religious groups are being banned from ever running to be the president of the future Syria that would exist in this area. So it's not looking incredibly good as far as really trying to respect the differences and religions and cultures and ideologies of all of the different Syrian people. And it appears that this is already starting to descend the nation right back into chaos and right back into the scourge of civil war. Also, I keep on seeing a lot of people asking about this flag and what it is. No, it is not. It is not a flag of any kind of a movement here in the West. That is the flag of the Druze people. An entirely different flag with an entirely different purpose. And moving on into our last clip, we can also see the Druze flag hanging off of one of the government buildings in As-Suwaida. But from what we understand, the Druze are practically in open rebellion, and we're largely understanding that the area around the city of As-Suwaida, down here in the southern region of Syria, has practically broken away from the Syrian interim government effective immediately. And it does appear that the Druze people will be conducting open conflict against Jelani's interim government forces if they attempt to forcefully retake the region of As-Suwaida, or really the southwestern region of Syria as a whole. We're not entirely sure what the Israeli reaction to the situation is yet at this moment, but we do believe that the Israelis may attempt to advance further on into the country and attempt to bring the Druze people under their protective jurisdiction against the Jelani-led interim government. But a lot of people have been putting in their ideas about what may be behind this entire rebellion that's happening right now inside of Syria. And a lot of people are wondering, is Russia telling Iran to cause unrest in Syria to attempt to reinstall Assad into power? And it seems as though a large majority of people are saying yes, and a very small group of people are saying no. So Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so it looks like 79% of the audience said yes, and only 21% said no. And obviously, there's a lot of players basically in the game here right now, where, of course, Russia is trying to negotiate to get back to their bases inside of Syria. Iran has their faction as well that they're currently getting to go fight inside of Syria. Also, Israel has a faction as well, and there's probably more factions as well that we're not even mentioning right now. There's just a whole bunch of people involved in this with different interests all the way around. Russia wants to go back in there. I'm really not totally convinced that Russia wants to reinstall Assad, because Assad failed. Like, he's a failed dictator inside of Syria in the eyes of Russia. So I'm not sure if they'd want to reinstall him. And he's being holed up inside of Moscow right now, and he's being basically hiding in an apartment. So I doubt he's coming back. I would actually say, though, that Russia might be telling Iran to cause unrest just to simply destabilize the Jelani government, because he's not really being very favorable to Russia right now. So that might be the case, but I don't think they're trying to put Assad back. So I guess I'm with the nose. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to be entirely honest. I just believe that this, I don't really think the Russians are trying to put Assad back into power either, but I really don't know what's going on. I think it's just the fact that it's been poor handling by Jelani that has really led to this happening. Because I do want to put this out there again, that when Jelani came into power, he made a lot of promises and assurances to the Syrian citizenry that he never followed through on. He did state that the Syrian interim government was going to respect and allow religious beliefs of any kind inside of the modern Syrian Arab Republic, that they were going to once again reinstitute education institutions in a non-secular form, meaning that they would be without any kind of religious overtures, and all of that has been reversed. They have now completely banned some particular religious sects from ever running to be the president of Syria. They have also begun secular religious teachings inside of schools, meaning that they're trying to largely impose onto the children of different religious beliefs in Syria the Shiite belief in Islam. Jelani's group is largely aligned with that specific sect of Islam. They also appear to be largely attempting to trample on the rights of the different cultural and religious groups inside of Syria, and all of that would come together to create a great deal of unrest or unhappiness with the Jelani government, and especially considering how weak and unstable the interim government is, considering that it's in its infancy and how poorly things have been handled. It's not really been handled fragilely at all by Jelani. I do believe that the Iranians may have just seized the opportunity to attempt to support and fund this rebellion to see if they could have Jelani overthrown and then create some form of a surefire radical Islamic republic inside of the Syrian Arab Republic's remains. I think that's largely what's happening at this point, because I would personally have to say at this point, from everything that we've heard coming out of Syria, I believe this really is not exactly funded and sponsored by an external power with really no reason at all, rather than they want Jelani gone. I think Jelani has really brought this back onto Syria again with the incredibly draconian way that they've been trying to handle the government and what the future of Syria would look like. Because, once again, to remind everyone, we said that in the best case scenario, they could become some sort of a emirate or a kingdom like Jordan or Saudi Arabia or the United Arab Emirates, and in the worst case scenario they may become a little bit more of a strict Islamic emirate, but nevertheless they would largely turn into something all right, at least according to Jelani's original statements when he came into power. He reversed all of that, completely pissing off everyone inside of Syria that actually thought they would have a good run of things without being screwed over by the ruling power, and now they're all going to be screwed over by the next ruling power after Assad. So what reason do they have to try and live inside of the Syrian interim government's world when there really isn't going to be any benefits for them, or they're not even going to be on the same running level as most of the Sunni Arabs or Shiite Arabs that live within the country? It wouldn't really make a lot of sense to any of them, and that's why we see that most of them are in open revolt at this point. But still, I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. But nevertheless, it does appear that the Syrian civil war will be back on the menu for news coverage here on this channel. But moving on from that and out of that little bit of news, it is time for us to move on into a little bit of news that happened in East Asia today. We were able to hear that the Republic of China Air Force, or Taiwan, largely, for many people who may not know what the Republic of China is, detected 11 Chinese balloons near to their island and have been observing them. We can actually see the balloons right here and their path from their original detection areas along the median line and the paths that they took over Taiwan. We can actually see that number 11 and number 13 and number 9 are all flying pretty much over the northern area of the Republic of China itself, which is pretty interesting to see. And once again, the Chinese are back at it with the balloons again. Nothing new there, but still an interesting thing to see. Moving on from that, though, it is time for us to get on into the major news event of the night, which is the war in Ukraine, which we have been able to see that once again, the armed forces of Ukraine have been conducting successful offensives on the front lines and are pushing the Russian Federation back again for about the 15th day in a row. But before we get on into all of this news and the little bit of American-Finnish news that we have within Eastern Europe, I do want to make sure that we address just a couple of questions, just a few at this moment, to take a little bit of a breather and to completely differentiate this Middle Eastern segment from the Eastern European segment that we're going to be having here in a second. But I do have to thank the whopping 9,000 people who were here at the peak tonight so far, and the 36,000 people who have watched this stream in the first hour hour, because I hope that y'all been enjoying the news. We don't really hear that a new civil war breaks out in Syria often. Usually we just hear that it's still going on. It's very rare to see a new one beginning. So y'all were here for a historic day again. Y'all have seen the outbreak of another war in the world, and it's a little bit interesting to think that actually happened. But beyond that, I do want to make sure that we get to some of them questions. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our first super chat question of the night. This one goes to JMP Travelers, a longtime channel legend, by the way, who puts in the largest super chat of the night, a massive $100 donation. And thank you very much, JMP, for the massive support and helping to keep the channel running. We do appreciate that. And JMP says, give Nightbot a shout out and take one from the chat. And also, I'm sure Nightbot will appreciate that. Maybe it'll be a little less cantankerous now that it's gotten a little credit, but maybe so. But thank you very much for the support. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to thank you for the massive support, JMP Traveler, and thank you so much for enjoying this channel and helping it to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep this thing running. And so I got to thank you so much once again for the support. And I also have to say that we have to give Nightbot a shout out. Nightbot is our robotic assistant here on the channel that helps us to moderate the chat little by little. It usually is fairly draconian in how it does it. It just times people out for sometimes the most random of things, but it still helps us out in cutting out our workload a little bit, because after all, it is just Matthew and me here behind the scenes. There's no one extra that's working on the show. But I do thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running all the way up until this day. We've been able to cover all kinds of crazy things: the Syrian Civil War, the Second Syrian Civil War, the rising tensions in between Taiwan and China, the conflict in between North and South Korea. It's not a full-blown war, but still a conflict nevertheless. We've been able to cover pretty much everything that's been going on in the Middle East in between Israel and Iran. We've been able to cover everything going on in between Ukraine and Russia. And we've even been able to cover other things at different points, a large number of them over the course of years at this point. And I do have to say that I thank you so much for always being around here, JMP Traveler, and thank you for the massive support once again, because it wouldn't have been possible for us to be able to keep the lights on and pay the bills and do this as our full-time job if it wasn't for amazing folks like you who went out of their way to support this channel and help to keep us on air. Nobody has to do that at all. Nobody has to throw in a single cent of support to this channel, but folks like you are the reason why this entire channel is possible and help us to keep this thing running all the way up until the present day. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. And of course, we will make sure to take one from the chat. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so the question for the chat goes to none other than Jay Bagwell, a channel legend as well. And Jay said, based on these events, do you still believe Israel should back out of Syria? And I was waiting for this question right here. That was a question I was waiting to pop up, and Jay jumped on the question. So, Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that it's a little bit of a tough one, because I generally don't like the idea, and here's the reason why. I would say that creating a protective zone or a sanitary zone wouldn't be that bad of an idea, considering that they're now going into a second civil war. It at least would stop some people from being caught up in the scourge of war that will be happening across Syria. The problem is that Syria has been occupying and administering the Golan Heights for about 50 years at this point, and has made it incredibly clear that they're never going to leave. Now, that largely has protected the Druze people living within the Golan Heights from the ebbs and flows of Syria at large, but at the same time, that kind of a quote-unquote not really official invasion or annexation of land, but still largely an official annexation of land, is something that really isn't supposed to be supported or upheld in the United Nations, which is of course completely useless, or really international law at large. And I really do not like the idea of Syria taking more ground and permanently keeping it. If they said that they were going to create a temporary sanitation zone or sanitary zone to stop the Druze people from being steamrolled by, say, Jelani or any other group within the region, as long as a bad group doesn't come in charge, I think that would not be bad at all. I think that'd actually be very beneficial for the Druze people. But at the same time, I think there should be an understanding or an arrangement made in advance that if a government that does respect the rights and customs of the Druze people does come into power in Syria, and it actually is largely a benevolent government, then Israel should hand that land back over to the Syrians so that way it could be a part of the Syrian Arab Republic, because legally that land will always be the Syrian Arab Republic's unless if they were to ever officially cede it by treaty, which they probably never would. So that would largely be my opinion at this point, but I I could see it, especially with the outbreak of a second civil war. I can certainly see the argument, and I would say that probably is in the best interest of the Druze people. If the Israelis just created a sanitary zone around them, they wouldn't even have to get involved in the civil war that's going to be sweeping across Syria now and well on into the future. But before this, just a couple of days before this started to break out, I would say that there really was no justification, unless if the Israelis had information that I didn't have, which is probably true. Because at that time and at that moment, there was no civil war breaking out, so it really just looked like Israel was just moving in to hold more land, although it didn't really appear that anything, at least publicly, was happening to the Druze. But now it appears that something certainly will happen to them if they continue to stay within the Syrian interim government's area of control. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And also at the same time, I can't really dog on the Israelis for doing that, because it now appears that the Turks are going to be doing the exact same thing within northern Syria. And considering that the Turks are now going to be creating a sanitary zone, and the Israelis have already stated they're going to be creating a sanitary zone, literally everyone around them that has the ability to do it is creating a sanitary zone inside of Syria, either to protect the people that are in Syria and also stop the flood of refugees from pouring into either Turkey or Israel. Although Israel would most likely just turn them away. Turkey's been trying to keep all of the refugees inside of their sanitary zones, and also, the fact of the matter is that largely would start to remove a lot of people from being in the civil war. And considering that's already gone on for 10 years and it's been one of the bloodiest civil wars that we've seen in the Middle East so far, I really can't make an argument to say that it would be a bad thing for everyone to try and create sanitary zones and remove a large amount of the population, if possible, from any kind of a future conflict that would be happening in the area. So I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. But Matthew, what do you think? What do you think about it?
I would honestly say it's a bit tricky. I would say that myself as well, because once again, now seeing this situation breaking out, it would make sense for the Israelis to make sure the Druze are protected, and maybe creating a sanitary zone would be a wise thing to do, because with so many different players in this fight at this point, once again, we've got Iran, Russia, Turkey, and several other factions as well. So it's just basically just it's just a mess, honestly. There's no other way to describe it. And Israel must look out for their interests as well. I'm not sure if Israel should go way too overboard, though. They shouldn't necessarily go in and start going ham and bombing the whole place to the ground, but they should look out for the Druze people that are, of course, right there near the border of Israel. So I think they're doing a good thing, actually. And now seeing this breaking out, Israel is doing a wise thing by protecting them. But outside of that, though, they got to be cautious, because Israel can't go too crazy, because, with so many different factions at play here, you don't want to end up bombing the wrong one and then it goes sideways. Like, for example, if Turkey's in there, you don't want to accidentally get caught up with that. So, it's just a mess.
And also another thing that I do have to say is that this is something I'd have to say is a bit of an issue. The current president of the United States is withdrawing all U.S. forces from Syria at this very moment. I believe most of them have already been withdrawn. So there are no U.S. forces currently in the area that can provide support to the Syrian Democratic Forces of northeastern Syria, which most likely will also be breaking away in the middle of the chaos to defend them against anyone who may try and take over their lands and once again start to oppress their people. So if we're talking about sanitary zones, I would say that the United States might want to come in and once again assure the security of the Kurdish people within northeastern Syria, because the Turks, just being completely honest, certainly do not have the best wishes of Kurdish people on their minds. They largely have a pretty decent bias against Kurds due to the Kurds that live around the area of Batman within southeastern Syria, southeastern Turkey, and the KPP, which has been conducting attacks against the Turkish for quite many decades. They really don't view the SDF favorably at all for that reason. They view them as pretty much a terrorist force, a lot like the PKK, and for that reason, I think it would be crucial or pertinent for the United States of America to go in and once again keep a minimal peacekeeping force of a couple of thousand troops inside of northeastern Syria to ensure that the Kurdish people and the SDF don't get steamrolled by, say, this rebel force if they were able to take control of the entirety of the country, or Jelani and his attempt to possibly try and create some sort of a draconian leadership that would begin to lead the Syrian Arab Republic with an iron fist, just like Assad did before he went out of power last year.
You know what is a bit concerning, though? One group you haven't really heard much about, which honestly is a kind of an ominous sign at this point, I would say, is once again, ISIS is still in there, and we haven't heard really anything necessarily about ISIS specifically constituting itself and trying to go to bat with these other factions. So I'm not sure what they're planning to do. Of course, they probably do have something up their sleeve. I mean, surely they're not going to sit by while this chaos is going on and simply just sit back and watch it. I would imagine they're probably going to get involved. So I wonder if that's going to be popping up in the next couple of days, or are they going to stay out?
Man, here before long, man, everyone's going to be bawling until they hear the clash of the swords, the swing of the blade, and then everyone's going to be like, all right, get in there. Like, it's like everyone's going to be dogpiling into Syria again, like they did back in the mid-2010s.
If ISIS shows up, then that's going to present a new problem, because obviously we can't let ISIS get a foothold in Syria. If they have strong enough forces, they could end up plowing through these different factions and end up taking charge of the place. It's possible. So at that point, we might be looking at potentially maybe a Western intervention if ISIS starts constituting itself really strong in Syria, which would, of course, be very bad, because then either Israel, the United States, or someone, maybe Turkey, or some country is going to come in there and take care of that threat, because that is one group that we know how really bad they are. Like, we've seen that in action for a decade or more, and we can't let them come back. So, if that happens, it could be going down with the Western side of things too.
It really could be. And also, I saw someone say, I thought the president said that he defeated ISIS. Not really. There's really no way to beat them. That's actually the truth. To be entirely honest, you really can't beat any of these groups. Like, you can't really beat pro-Assad people in Syria, because they're just going to go into hiding, and you really can't find them all. Just the same as Jelani's people. If they got defeated right now, they're still going to be out there, and they're still going to be wanting to push forward the ideas that Jelani had. While ISIS was technically defeated back in the late 2010s, around 2018, by a coalition of forces inside of Syria and Iraq, they never were truly wiped out, because a lot of those people who have the ideology of ISIS ingrained into them and that form of radical extremism, they just went into hiding, and they're still living all throughout Iraq and Syria right now, and they're just waiting for their moment to rise back up and once again get back into conflict. They largely have been spending, from what we know, the entire time from 2018 to now, really keeping low and attempting to recruit locals back into their cause. So we don't really know how strong or weak they are at this point. They could have been able to rebuild their numbers, and they could reemerge as an incredibly strong group, or they may still be an incredibly weak group and have not really been able to recruit a lot of members. We just don't really know for sure. But that's another thing that a lot of people do not know. Syria and Iraq, at least as far as the stability or cohesion of their governmental apparatuses within Western Iraq and mostly around the area of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in Syria, is incredibly weak. It's almost non-existent. So it's almost like the Wild West out there. You can really do and say whatever you want, and as long as you kind of keep your head low, nobody even knows who you are or what you're saying, and no one's really observing, probably outside the CIA, your social media habits if you're supporting one of these extremist groups within that region. So it's incredibly hard for them to be able to actually try and iron this sort of a thing out and ensure that it doesn't pop up. They just simply don't have the abilities or the government apparatus within that area to be able to try and maintain order and, of course, crack down on these kinds of extremist groups such as these. So they're still out there, and, they could pop back up at any moment. And we've already heard that, at least in a couple of instances, small little cells of them have popped up but have been crushed by the SDF, at least at this point. But anyways, with that, I hope we did address that the best we could. And also, once again, huge shout out to JMP Traveler for the support and help with this channel to keep on running. And also, great question, Jay Bagwell. And I hope I was able to answer that somewhat well, at least in my opinion. And I hope that Matthew was also able to add in his 2 cents as well. Because together we create a nickel, I think. Well, actually, we only create 4 cents. I believe we'll have to have one person throw in their cent, not 2 cents, and then we'll make a nickel. And so with that,
I would like to say that we each throw in 25 cents apiece. And I guess you could say we're the 50-cent army. Oh, well, maybe not.
Well, actually, Matthew, I think if we both threw in a nickel, we would be 10 cent.
That's true. It could be the 10-cent army. What's the one that China has? I'm getting confused now. Like, which one is that?
I think it's 10 cent. Yeah, that's why I said that.
Okay, 10 cent. I'm 50-cent army. No, we're not this is not the rappers army. We're trying to like pick up the China 10-cent army. So yeah, that's the right one. I was getting my my armies of cents mixed up.
And also, another thing I would want to say is, if we put together our $2 half dollars, our 2 50 cents, we can make a whole dollar, which is equivalent to nothing in the current U.S. economy. But with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well. But still, huge thanks to you once again, JMP Traveler, for that insanely massive support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, let's see. Gunfox said China is 50-cent army. I'm confused as hell at this point. Someone said 50 Cent Army is China. So I was right. I was right.
Oh.
I was right in the end. So I was right. I was thinking it's either 10 cent or 50 cent. I don't really even remember. But either way, y'all know who we're talking about. Something. It's less than $1. So whatever. But anyways, going into our next super chat here, this one goes to Rick Gullinchin, who puts in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, Rick, for the massive support. And we appreciate that very much. And thank you for helping to keep the channel running. And they said, hello from Canada, and keep up the great work, Enforcer. You guys rock.
And thank you so much, Rick, for the massive support and helping this channel to keep on running all the way from the nation of Canada, just to our north, our northern neighbors of Canada. And I would assume, I would put money on it, you live somewhere down here where my mouse cursor is circling, within the southern area of Quebec or the southern area of Ontario. Pretty much everyone in Canada lives in that area. I think it's like 90-something% of the population of Canada lives right in that area. So I'm assuming that you probably live there. But I do have to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it was not for folks like you all the way up there from Canada, we wouldn't be able to make sure the Lee Spring Army continues to keep the channel running, and we wouldn't be able to keep putting out the news for all of y'all. And it's really crazy to think that we've been able to do this with international support from all around the world. There are members of the Lee Spring Army from literally every single country within the Western Alliance sphere, from the United States to Canada to Iceland to Switzerland to the UK and Germany, and all the way over into Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. There are supporters of the Lee Spring Army from all around the globe, and we are incredibly appreciative and thankful to know that you're one of them, all the way up there from Canada, the nation of maple syrup and the nation of polite people, until something is said about their country being a state of the United States, and then they start booing anthems like No Tomorrow. But beyond that, I thank you so much once again, and still, of course, great to know that we have friends all around the world that are a member of the Lee Spring Army. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, and with that, we are on to the final question of the segment, and then we're getting on into the rest of the news.
All right, and the final question of the segment goes to Skinless, who puts in a 50 as well. And thank you very much, Skinless, for that massive support also, and also helping to keep the channel trucking. And Skinless said, God bless you guys. Keep up the hard work, and Slava Ukraine. And also take one from the chat.
And I thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing running skinless. And also, I gotta ask you, how is it being skinless? Like, do you have to apply extra lotion? I don't know. Like, I feel like you're already moisturized at that point if you don't have skin. Because, you know, like, your muscles are, like, usually filled mostly with water. But beyond that, a very interesting affliction that you have. But nevertheless, I'm not one to judge. But I do thank you so much for enjoying our channel and wanting us to keep up the hard work. We are trying our best to do that. It's a struggle at this point. Some could say that it is my struggle. But beyond that, it is a struggle to keep this channel running day in and day out at this point, at least in terms of trying to make people happy. People are not happy no matter what. I mean, it's not really something I'm complaining about, but it's something that is just a fact of life at this point, and really has been for about the past 2 weeks. So we are just constantly fighting the fight to just keep on air and keep this thing running, and we're so happy to know that there are loads of y'all who really do enjoy this channel and love to watch it, and y'all will continue to support it and help it to keep on running, hopefully well on into the future. Because while we can't make everyone happy, I know that we are making all of y'all happy, and that says a lot in itself, and we're entirely honored and incredibly appreciative to know that we hold that kind of position of hopefully getting y'all a little bit of a laugh in the afternoon, really way late at night for those in the United States and for everyone else everywhere around the world, whatever time of day it is for y'all. But I'm glad to know that we can keep y'all company, get y'all a couple of laughs, and make sure to keep getting the news out there to all of y'all, because we're entirely honored and appreciative of being able to keep this thing rolling and let you all know of what is going on out there. And also, I see all these people bringing up, for some reason, some guy with a mustache. And you know something? I'm not even gonna kid. We were watching before the stream, because I was like, we were kidding around about something with some certain things. So we ended up watching that guy and his translated speech to English, and I listened to like a minute and a half of it, and then I told Matthew, because many of y'all will know that there was a certain podcast that talked about this certain guy, you know, the mustache man from Germany, and that they listened to his speech in English, and it really made a lot of sense or something like that, or it was really eerie. I listened to it, and I told Matthew, I was like, this guy's just yapping, and it doesn't even make any sense what he's saying. I was like, this is, like, I don't even know how he got a following, really, like, after I heard what he was saying. Like, it was like, I don't know, Matthew, I don't know about you, but I was like, what? I was like, okay, for everyone to always make it sound like this guy was a great speechwriter or a great orator, I'm not gonna lie, he had like no point to what he was saying, at least in the version I heard. I was like, I don't even know what he's getting at here. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well. But my takes of Mustache Man making a speech, honestly, D tier. It was pretty bad. I think there was a lot of other people who did it a lot better. Honestly, one of the people I think who did it really good was FDR. Like, just to get on like a rabbit hole. Like, every time he did a speech, he always had that little voice going, and it was always something good. You know, like, I always thought his speeches were pretty good. Let's see here. Eisenhower was pretty good. Like, Matthew, what I'm talking about, Matthew? Well, if you have a bus driver and he drives it into a ditch, you don't say, well, the bus driver had good intentions. You get a new bus driver. Like, I was like, he gets it.
I like Eisenhower. If we had straightforward stuff like that these days, we'd be in much better shape. People wouldn't be ripping their hair out.
Dude, honestly, man, I wish Teddy Roosevelt was around these days, man, because he literally got shot, all right? Like, shot in the chest, gets up, shows off the blood, and he's like, I just got shot. Anyways, you'd have to be a wuss to leave, and then he just gets right back into the speech. Just like, man, what a legend. And honestly, he had some pretty good stuff that he did as well, in my opinion. Teddy Roosevelt, absolute legend. National Park founder, trust buster. Just a real hero of the United States, in my opinion. I think he was one of the best presidents. I'd actually say that he probably is, in my opinion, the best president out there, of course, excluding the founding fathers, because I know everyone has, like, their favorite founding father, and of course, a lot of people are always like, well, George Washington set out an amazing precedent. Yes, he did, and I think that George Washington was very influential that way, but as far as presidents outside of the founding of the country, because, the founding fathers will always be on a pedestal of their own, as far as how people revere them, Teddy Roosevelt, in my opinion, was just the best president the United States ever had. Not only that, but for his life leading up to the presidency. Like, he was the one who rooted out the corruption in the police department in the city of New York. And I know that, the New York Police Department has had, some good times and some really bad times since then. But he was the first one to really conduct an anti-corruption campaign like that, and he did so good at it. It was just insane. It was, like, honestly, shocking how good he did at it, at least according to the historic accounts. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And also, we have to make sure to get that live chat. And so, Matthew, what do we got for that live chat?
All right. In honor of Skinless, the live chat question goes to Chris Chastain, who says, where are the Russians in all the Syria situation? And also, generally, where are the Israelis?
Let's see. That is a good question. And Matthew, can you reread it again just so that way I can collect my thoughts and make sure that the answer will be good?
Yeah, they said, where are the Russians in this whole Syria situation? And also, generally, where are the Israelis?
So far, I haven't seen the Russians directly involved in the situation, to be entirely honest with you. They're probably out there somewhere. We do know that there's still some Russian forces waiting to be evacuated out of Tartus and Latakia. So there currently are still Russians in the areas where the combat is going on right now. It's just that we haven't heard that they're directly involved in any of the ground fighting yet. So that seems to me to show that the Russians really aren't directly involved. I think if the Russians are involved, they're being involved through Iran and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, because once again, they're all a part of the same sphere of influence. So the Iranians might be doing the bidding of the Russians here. But as far as the Israelis, we haven't seen them advance further into Syria yet. But to be entirely frank with you, I'm not expecting that to be that much longer. It probably will be a few days or a week, and we'll see that Israeli forces begin to advance rapidly throughout southwestern Syria and pretty much take control of everything south of Damascus. And then they'll most likely maintain control of that with how the Israelis have done things so far, at least within the Golan Heights. They might control that indefinitely, which is really a violation of international law. But given the circumstances that we're seeing right now with civil war, speaking in the short term, I think that would be the best for the Druze people and the Syrians of southwestern Syria, because they will not have to be involved in incredibly dangerous conditions like being in the middle of a front line of a civil war. So with that, I hope that does address that at least the best I can, in my opinion. But still, a huge thanks to you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Skinless. If it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. We wouldn't be able to keep it running. And of course, Slava Ukraine, and long live the Lee Spring Army. And with that, it's time for us to move on from the question segment and on into Ukraine, because we were able to hear today something that I think is just so important to tell all of y'all. Before we even get into the actual news of what's happening in the front lines, there was something that Putin said today that I just thought was so important to remind everyone. This is what Putin said. This is the video clip of him saying it, but if you want the direct quote, we don't need anything foreign. Russia is not going to Russia is not going to give in to anyone during the SVO. The Russian Federation needs a version of the world that suits it. Meaning once again...
I'm sorry, but you don't hold the cards. You don't hold the cards, Putin. You have no right to say that.
Well, actually, he does. Actually, he holds cards. And I'm just kidding, by the way. He doesn't. That was a prank, by the way. That was a prank. But beyond that, this is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, it blows my mind when people try and say that the Russians are friends. They are not friends. They are enemies of the United States of America. What he is saying right here is that he wants to make the world into something that suits Russia, which is what the United States has done to the world over the past 70 years to suit ourselves. The United States turned the world into something that benefits America, and largely benefits all of its parts as well, that is a part of the American-led sphere. They want to do the same thing. There he is, saying it again. It's literally in the flesh. There are the words, the very words that would let you know Russia is not our friend. There they are again, and for some reason, some unknown reason, we keep on acting like the Russians might be friendly. They are not friendly. They are enemies of the United States of America, enemies of the Republic, and enemies of the Western sphere at large. That's what they are, and that's not going to change, because Putin is still in charge, and Putin has these delirious ideas that he can create a new Russian empire and bring it up to the prominence that Russia never even had historically. But anyways...
But Enforcer, I thought the globalists simply convinced us that Russia was the enemy because we're being told that the Russians, they're not really the enemy. It's just the globalists that's turned them into the enemy.
Yeah, exactly, man. Like the globalists are tanking the stock market out of spite. It's not because, everything's becoming 20% expensive. I'll have y'all know this. I'm not going to say the exact make or model of my car, but my car is not an American car. It's actually a German car. And I brought my car into servicing today. Just to let you all know, I want to bring this up for a second, because this is something I think is a little bit important. I brought my car into servicing today. Many of y'all may know that a lot of cars that are sold inside the United States are either from a foreign country, or a lot of their parts are produced in a foreign country. So when I brought my car into servicing today, and I have to get some things replaced, like the brakes, because I have gone without replacing the brakes for an entire year, although I was told a year ago the brakes need to be replaced because it costed a lot. But beyond that, when I came in today, I sat there and said, well, are the tariffs going to affect y'all? And the sales rep said, the technician said, yeah, we're all incredibly scared about it because nobody's coming to buy cars anymore, and also these repairs in the future are going to be costing about 20% or 30% more because of the tariffs. Just to put that out there for some people who may not know that, if your car is even American made, if it has the Ford emblem on it, most of the cost of those vehicles to buy is going to go up, because most of those parts are produced in foreign countries. Like a lot of the parts for the Ford Raptor, just for those of y'all to know, they're made in Mexico. So if there's 20% tariffs on Mexican goods, that means that most of the parts to make up your Ford F-150 are now 20% more expensive, meaning that the...
Oh, shucks, I'm not worried about that. I'll pay $100,000 for a truck, no problem.
Hell, we weren't trying to make America more affordable. That wasn't at all what we campaigned on. It's not like we had major rallies at our party's Congress to sit there and say something like that. Shit, we want to make it more expensive. That's what we want to do.
I've always wanted to spend $100,000 on a work truck. Yuck.
I never wanted to make America more affordable. I wanted to make it more expensive. Wasn't like I was complaining about the last guy making it unaffordable. Shit, eggs are going to look like nothing by the time we're done. Yuck. It's like,
honestly, I'm just saying, I don't know who was spending $70,000 for a truck in the first place. Like, if you want one, you got the money, good for you. But, that's an expensive truck. That's like a toy at that point. It's not really a real pickup truck. These pickup trucks are supposed to be workhorses. But if you're paying over $100,000 for a truck, Honestly, that's getting a little bit crazy. That's like a luxury car money at that point for a truck. I don't understand who's paying $100,000 for a truck.
Also, here comes someone saying you have no idea of economics, how it all works. I have a feeling that my the service department of the car company that I got my car from probably knows, because it sounds like everyone in that auto dealership sat there and said that the tariffs were going to be running them out of business for the large part. I'm not that I'm the expert. I'm largely taking it from the people who are having to import all of the parts for these cars, like mine, that are coming from overseas. So I don't have to be the expert. I can just talk to the people who are actually involved in the trade. But hey, I guess we always have to defer to people who, maybe don't work a job that have to deal with importing anything, and then they're, I guess, the subject experts, although their business doesn't get involved with that at all. I mean, that's honestly really annoying. Like, it's really annoying when people are like, let's see, in time, it will go down. Oh, well, come on. You're living in the delusion. So the tariffs stay up. The tariffs never disappear in this world that we're in right now. But for some reason, the prices are going to go back down eventually. That makes no sense at all.
Well, the only time they would go back down is if the manufacturing actually comes back to the United States. But in order for that to happen, we have to bring back every single manufacturing facility that left and went overseas to Asia. And that's going to take a lot more than 4 years. I can tell you that right now. I'm no expert in it, but you're not going to bring factories back in 6 months. That's not happening.
Nah, you're not going to be doing that anytime soon. I can tell you that. And also, I can tell you this. You're not going to be bringing the amount of coal and steel production back to the United States quick enough to make any of that possible. That no shot in hell of that happening. And also on top of that, what American wants to work in a steel mill or a coal mine at this point? Like, tell me one that does. Like, everyone wants to become a YouTuber like me. And like, that's not bad. Like, I'm not dissing YouTubers, I'm one, so I can't really shit on them too much. But at the same time though, no one wants to work those kinds of jobs. So we're still having to largely import the coke that would be needed to produce steel, and also we're largely having to just really import steel from overseas anyways, because we just don't have enough domestic production to bring all of these manufacturers back and then have them reliant entirely on a domestic supply of goods. Like, it just does not work. You have to trade, and the tariffs are going to be absolutely catastrophic no matter what way you look at it. Like that's not even political, that's just common sense, because anyone out there in the world will know that anytime tariffs have been conducted in the past, it didn't go well. Just go look at McKinley, why don't you go back and look at that? If you don't believe what I'm saying right now, McKinley, who was a president in the late 1890s, tried it, and it ended up creating an economic depression. Like, I'm not even kidding, that's what happened. Go pull it up, I'm not wrong. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well.
Also, by the way, someone took offense to my comment about the $100,000 truck thing. They said, "Bud, I make over $2 million a year. I'm getting my $100,000 truck." Listen, if you make over $2 million a year, go ahead and get the $100,000 truck. Like, you've obviously earned enough money to get it, so go right for it. But for most people, though, a $100,000 truck is like, that could be more than some people's yearly salary. In fact, it is more than most people's yearly salary. So, I'm not sure what the market is they're selling to, because there's very few people in the country that make $2 million a year like this person does. So I'm just saying, like, I don't think you're going to sell too many these days.
Yeah, I would have to say, I just don't think it really is an easy thing for people to throw down $100,000 on a pickup truck. If you can afford it, go at it. But I don't think a lot of people can afford that kind of a thing. It's not really about making it as expensive as possible. It's really trying to make sure that everything is as affordable or cheap as possible, so that way more people can live the good life and actually afford to do it. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. Maybe words of prosperity aren't what people want these days. Let's jack up the prices. Yeah! But anyway, so moving on from that and on into the actual statement that Putin made. Here it is right here.
Не собираемся этого делать.
Спасибо.
Мы должны выбрать для себя такой вариант мира, который бы нас устраивал и который бы обеспечивал на длительную историческую перспективу спокойствие для нашей страны.
Да.
Нам ничего чужого не нужно, но мы
свое не отдадим.
И нам нужен такой вариант, вот именно такой, который обеспечил бы стабильное развитие нашей страны в условиях мира и безопасности.
Да.
Вот. Значит,
And that's the end of that clip right there. But nevertheless, Putin once again making it incredibly clear that he's looking out for Russia's interest, and he's not looking to try and become friends with any country out there in the world at all, and of course not the United States of America. So moving on from that, and out of that a little bit of domestic news, we were able to see that Finland and the United States were conducting joint exercises in Finland. We're going to be turning that down a little bit, but there's an American B-52 surrounded by Finnish FA-18s.
Why doesn't the big bad Vladimir Putin come out and show them what for?
You know, I wonder. I wonder. But there goes the JDAM. Hitting the target dead on. Look at that. Amazing stuff right there.
At least that one hit the right spot, like what happened in South Korea.
Oh, man, in South Korea, that was a different story. Like, a very different story. But we were also able to see that the Ukrainians did hit an FSB headquarters in Bryansk, and from what we understand, 30 FSB agents are in serious condition, and it's unknown if any of them are dead at this point. But here's the clip. This is the FSB headquarters, or what remains of it for the large part. Well, that's the end of the clip, but still, the Russians are having a rough time. Moving on from that and into the western area of Ukraine, we did get to see a Ukrainian soldier thanking the United States for providing a Hawk air defense system to their air defense battery.
Dear Americans, thank you for all support you already provided to Ukraine. This particular Hawk SAM has shut down already a bunch of cruise missiles, saved lives, and protected our critical infrastructure. I've been in the US, I was studying there. You have a great country, it's beautiful. I wish Ukraine one day could be as peaceful, prosperous, and strong as the United States. Thank you for your support.
Pretty nice.
Man, that video. Thing is sick, by the way, moving around like that. Like,
yeah.
That is actually cool as hell. I like that. The sounds that go along with it are even sicker.
Dude, honestly, man, for this thing to have been put into service in the 50s, this thing is like sci-fi, even still.
Yeah, I like that, actually. Like, you know, everybody's saying, oh, it's defunct, it's old and nasty. It's like, I don't know. I've never really seen one moving around until now. It's actually pretty sick.
Man, that is actually
our critical infrastructure.
Dude, that is so cool, honestly. That whole thing is just neat. But anyways, moving on. Yeah, man, it's incredible, man, really. But moving on from that, we also got to see the Ukrainians shooting down a drone. And there's the drone. And here it comes about to be shot down. You hear the rifle fire. The camera's trying to stay on it. That's a little tough for it. And now it's going into a nosedive. It appears to have been hit. We hear it speeding it up. Man, that girl is going. Any second now. Oh, and an impact. And it was taken down.
Yes.
I see you know your shaheads well. Good one. And you, sir, are you ready to receive my limp Jelani? Like, how dare you, sir? But moving on from that and on up into the Kursk area, we also were able to see a Russian turtle tank being destroyed by the 78th as they start playing the Charlie Brown intro. But we can see here the BMP down there below. It's about to be destroyed here in a moment. And we can see here, they did hit the BMP, and it is cooking. It's cooking up like a nice southern barbecue. And that's the end of that clip right there, but one hell of a thing to see. And moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see them taking out an FPV drone.
I hear that exact same drone noise that we just heard in the video outside, like the actual place that we're in.
Uh-oh. They found us. Like,
those damn hobbyists.
They're just hobbyists. That's, oh, wait a minute. I forgot. The Ukrainians shot the drone down. They got out of their car, which looks like it might be a Lada, and they just no-scoped the drone. Here it is, right here again, just to show y'all. And they got it right before it hit the truck. Pretty impressive, honestly. So now they can hop right back into the car, or the truck, whichever way you'd want to call it. I think that's more so of a car, and a very small one at that, and they'll be back on their way.
Very basic car right here. This thing's like straight up bare metal on the interior.
Man, almost like a buhanka nearly. But moving on from that and out of that clip and on into our location unknowns, we also were able to see that the Russians are using bullets as nails in their trenches. Here's the clip. That's the back of a 5.45 by 39 bullet. You can see the primer right there. We see him pushing another one in, almost like a nail. I don't know if that's safe.
And what is he hitting that into?
It looks like some sort of some sort of padding for the wall, something like that.
Huh.
Dude, he hits it with the sharp end of the axe, like at some point, like one of the sharp edges of the back end of the axe head, and it just sets the bullet off. It's like, this isn't smart, man. And there's more of them. They are just using these all over.
That seems a little bit risky, I'm just saying.
All right, well, I guess that's Russian construction for you. Moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see Estrella decoy made by the Ukrainians. And it looks a lot like Estrella. I mean, that's very, very similar to Estrella. Look at that. Whoa. Look at that decoy. Whoa. But moving on from that...
Looks pretty real, actually. It's a pretty decent decoy.
It's pretty decent, I'd say. And we also got to see a new anti-drone system, a personal anti-drone system for Russian infantry. They put a radiator on it, a domo, and also a box. Just in case if you weren't carrying enough crap on your combat gear already, look at me run around with this stupid thing on my back.
Is that the cancer generator 3000?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Yes. Cook the brains, bliat.
They call this the tumor-matic.
Bro swore he got 5 times smarter when he wore his backpack.
That dude, he turns this thing on, he starts going, duh, duh. You know, like,
oh, man.
Also, he's acting like it's lightweight and mobile, but you can see that he's having to lean incredibly far forward to, like, offset the weight of this thing, clearly showing that this thing probably weighs maybe 70 pounds. He's like, look, you can bend over to get screwed by your commander, and then you can lean backwards. So, like, it's like...
Damn. We got that car batter on the bottom, too. I feel myself mutating as we speak, bliat.
Dude, he's gonna be like that guy who picked up the graphite in Chernobyl in the first episode. Ah, my hand! You know, he's about to be like that in a second. But anyways, moving on from that clip and on to our next one, we also got to see the Ukrainians cutting up some explosives with a sawzall.
Hell yeah, baby. That's some Alabama rednecking.
Well, hell, I didn't know the Ukrainians were cheer like that. Damn, I'm going to become their friends tomorrow. Like I am. There we go.
Yes, you got to say that after you're not dying after cutting through the explosive.
Yeah, I am Krillo, and welcome to Jackass. Like today, we're going to be using a sawzall on C4. Let's see what happens. Man, honestly, I respect them for that. I respect them. They're real. They're real like that. But moving on from that and into our last bit of location unknown news, we also got to see the Russian casualty report, and holy moly, no Bobcats!
No Bobcats again. I think the Bobcat losses are just hitting hard times, but Enforcer, tell us more.
And of course, Miss Disa, the keeper of the record, stated that all categories did continue downward trend. Perhaps Russia's running out of things for Ukraine to destroy? We can hope. And then someone said, this is propaganda. And no, propaganda is what a British person does when they take a good look at something. This is not a propaganda. But we are going to take a propaganda at this casualty report. And we were able to see that 1,140 Russian soldiers were wounded and killed over the past 24 hours. Along with 7 APCs, 94 supply trucks, 5 main battle tanks, 21 artillery pieces, 80 drones, and 2 anti-aircraft systems. All in all, it wasn't the biggest day that we've seen, but it wasn't that bad either. Moving on from that and into the frontline news near to Kupiansk, we were able to see the 429th deploying Russian forces and also our eardrums.
My eardrums have been absolutely just terrified tonight at least 5 times.
What is that? I cannot hear you over the sound of tinnitus. He's so loud.
It's a memorandum of the war, Blyat. When you have the ringing in the ears, it's like it's a benefits, they say in the Russian military.
And also, I did get a laugh out of Sheffield Steel UK. He said, "Ah!" It's like, thank you for appreciating that.
Man, he got a big laugh out of that.
Oh, and they got a Russian. Oh, look at that. Oh, my lord. Oh, you see, they got another one. Wow,
They got a little bit of everything.
And they blew them all up, too. Toasted them to pieces. Like to see it. Love to see it. Moving on from that little clip right there. Big nice shout out to the 429th Achilles, who was able to knock out those Russian vehicles. We're now going to be moving on down into Crimea, where we get to see them hitting some Russian drones. Take a gander at this. Take a little look. There's a Russian drone down there. That looks to be a Zala. Hey, no offense or anything, but have you been checked for Tourette's? What? You know.
Oh man, checking for Tourette's, those Russians, I'll tell you what.
Man, more so checking for Toretsk. I think they lost it. Like
Man, they were cured.
Now the Ukrainians have Toretsk.
Oh, yes, true. Yeah,
But moving on from that and down into the area around Seversk, we also get to see the Ukrainians hitting Russian logistics and the 4th Rapid Mobilization Brigade, the Rubish.
And that's why you don't leave your barn doors wide open like that.
Man, some farmer is racing off of the show right now to his barn to shut the doors so that way a drone doesn't sprinkle his hay with water and make them spontaneously combust.
Yeah, it sucks when that happens. Don't ever let your hay bales get wet, by the way, because when they get damp enough, they burn.
When they get damp enough? I'm not even kidding. We're not even kidding with that. When hay bales get damp enough and you put them in storage in, say, a barn, and they start to dry, there's a bacteria that forms in the damp hay that once the moisture disappears enough, they quite literally just combust. They catch on fire. So hay bales can just explode practically inside of a barn if they were damp before you stored them. So let your hay bales dry before you put them in a barn, lest the whole thing could go up in flames. Really weird thing. I never knew that happened until it happened. But moving on from that, we also got to see a destroyed Vuhaka.
Она еще горит до сих пор. Ну нахуй, 20
Oh my god, the whole thing was blown away. This $3,000 van.
Бак только с той же стороны был. Бензин горит, кого сейчас пробую запускать. Блядь, петушня ебаная еще.
We hear some gunfire in the distance as he looks at the destroyed Buhanka. And that's the end of the clip, but I think that Buhanka has not seen worse days than that. Meanwhile, in Chasiv Yar, we were able to see the Russians getting slammed, and we were able to hear the creepy music before it began. And they're about to start knocking out BMDs at an unprecedented rate. All those little lights down there are Russians. And you see the Russians and their BMDs making their way. And we can see them knocking out the BMDs. And here comes another Russian BMD that also got hit.
Holy moly! I was just going on Twitter real quick to do a quick little news search to make sure that nothing breaking was happening. Goodness gracious, there's some crazy stuff happening in Syria right now. It looks like the Jolani government is getting a little bit extreme with making examples out of the rebels. They're doing some crazy things to them right now, some wild things. that we can't even show on the stream, nor can I describe it either. But it's getting very, very nasty. It looks like Jelani's trying to scare the enemy into compliance.
Huh. Can you text me what that is?
Yes, yes.
Let's see here. I'm trying to see if I can find anything on it while we watch this clip here. Let's see here. Oh, well, that's not that good.
Yes, it's not good. Just to put it in a very non-graphic way, they've got their vehicles. They've got a little bit of some rope, and they have some. They're dragging.
And we can see here that the Russians are still getting plastered out there. They're getting targeted and destroyed. But it does sound as though the Jelani government isn't exactly following the rules of war, you see. Meanwhile, that guy up there on the minaret, he's still going. Like, through all this, he's kept going. Also, a lot of people are coming up with even worse things than that in the chat after you said unspeakable things. I'm honestly like, well, actually, there's a lot of things that could happen that are worse now. But we were able to see the Ukrainians were able to take several city blocks in Chasiv Yar today back from the Russians. So it does appear that the Ukrainians are even pushing the Russians back in Chasiv Yar at this point. We were also able to hear that in the city of Luhansk, the Russians came under attack from drones. We were able to hear that right here. And moving even further on down the line and towards the area of Pokrovsk, we were able to see that the Ukrainians were even hitting Russian forces with Bradleys in this area as well, continuing to keep them pinned down and also helping the Ukrainian counteroffensive to make ground and make contact with the enemy and destroy them in detail. And that's the end of the clip, but moving on from that and into our next clip in Pokrovsk, we also were able to see that the Ukrainians are continuing to push the Russians back even further. We can see all of the advances that have been made by the Ukrainian armed forces and their counteroffensives, and we can see that they are continuously pushing them a little bit further back, a little by little at this point, away from the city of Pokrovsk and maintaining a pretty decent defensive line within the area, showing once again that the Russian Federation is on the back foot at this point within Pokrovsk. Meanwhile, further south near to Kurakove and Marinka, we were able to see the Ukrainians continuing to hit Russians within this direction. This clip was made by none other than the 43rd Brigade, or the 37th Brigade, correction. And we see here the Russians getting into their trenches down on the tree lines the old-fashioned way, and it appears the Ukrainians are about to do the old-fashioned treatment on them as well. And here they go, any second now.
They're giving them the old-fashioned peppering.
They're giving them clusters. Them clusters.
Seasoned with salt and pepper generously.
And greasing them. And you see them hitting a Russian thing. I couldn't tell if that was a motorcycle or what, but still, very good to see that they were continuing to repel the Russians. Meanwhile, we also got to see another clip from the 37th. Actually, this is a duplicate. Sorry about that, everyone. That is, in fact, a duplicate. We'll be getting rid of that. And moving a little bit further on down the line and into the area of Sevastopol, as we were able to hear that there was a major Ukrainian drone attack on the port overnight. And we were also able to see an additional clip confirming that there were apparently more drones in the air than just those.
Уже третий пошел. На аэродром, походу. Пиздец.
And we also were able to hear that apparently Belbek Airfield, just north of Sevastopol, appears to have been hit. That's what the glow in the sky is coming from, is the fire down on Belbek below. But with that, it's now time for us to move on out of Crimea and on into Kyiv, where we do not have a speech. Zelensky did not make a speech today. So we are going to be moving straight on into our question segment right here, right now. But before we do that, we do have a very interesting poll, and we love the polls. This one's named Ladislav. I'm just kidding. This is actually a poll that we have in the chat. And France is sharing its intel with Ukraine after the U.S. ended all of its intel sharing. Will France be punished? And it seems as though a lot of people are believing that the French will not be punished. And so, Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So we did hear today that Macron has started intel sharing with Ukraine after the United States has cut off all intel sharing. And according to some reports that I saw, it sounded like the U.S. was trying to dissuade Britain from sharing intelligence with Ukraine as well. So that way, Ukraine basically has no resources to get any intelligence from. But now France has stepped in and they are filling the gap with intelligence. So it looks like 60% of the audience said no, the U.S. will not allow it to happen. Or excuse me, the U.S. will allow it to happen. Pardon me. Well, 18% said yes, the U.S. will punish France for it. And 12% said it depends on the details. And I would say that I think the U.S. will try to punish France for this, honestly, because this basically negates the entire plan that the United States had for trying to force and coerce Ukraine to the negotiating table for the minerals deal. So I'm actually with the 18%. I think they're going to try to threaten France over this and see if they can get them to back down. But Enforcer, what say you?
I had to say that I'm probably going to be with the 18% as well, because this largely is completely mitigating one of the impacts that the United States is making on Ukraine at this point. And so we'll most likely see that the United States begins to threaten the French with some form of a reprisal, although there really isn't any extra to be made at this point. France really doesn't rely on American weaponry. It's one of the few countries that's entirely self-sufficient militarily, even from other European countries. And not only that, the French are already have, I believe, it's 20-something% sanctions levied against them, considering that they're a part of the European Union. So, well, not sanctions, but tariffs. So considering all that, there really isn't a lot more that the United States could do against France at this point, or have any leverage on them with. So with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well, at least in my opinion. But with that, it is time for us to move on into the rest of the questions that we have tonight. We don't have any more news. I don't know why I was about to say that. That'd just be crazy. But we do have a lot of questions. Lots of questions. Real questions. Long-lasting questions. And I do want to make sure that we get to as many of them as we can. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right. And also, by the way, I just wanted to point this out because a lot of people were saying in the live chat, hey, look, you don't know what you're talking about. You're not an economics professor. You're not an expert. Well, a Ford tech just popped in the chat, by the way, who apparently works with Ford as a technician, probably in one of their dealerships. And he said the struggle is real and all the parts got to come through Canada, or at least for some of the vehicles. So the tariffs do affect that. So what do you know? Another person that works on vehicles saying the tariffs will affect the cost of the parts and also probably the vehicles as well.
Oh,
actually, not probably, because I have heard today that the vehicle costs are going up almost immediately as a result of the tariffs. So there you go.
Oh, he doesn't know anything, Matthew. That's just some mechanic. That's a political hack. The prices are going to be rising because the globalists hate us. So it's like, get real, man. I mean, honestly, I got to tell y'all, it's really crazy how it works. Because I remember, I'm just going to be honest with y'all, all right, I just kind of sit back and enjoy things, and people cuss us out and unsubscribe because they don't get that we're not really politically aligned. So we really dislike all of them equally. But the last president was dealing with a severe financial issue. The economy was doing poorly in the last year of the last guy's administration, and he would come out and say the economy is fine. And we could clearly tell that that wasn't the case because we live in the United States and, we kind of deal with the economy every day. So I knew that that wasn't true. So we would come onto the air and we would make comments like, it's not really doing that well. And then people would go, what do you mean? The economy's doing great. It's better than ever. And that would just be a complete lie. I mean, that's just not true because, when you're paying for groceries and they're just getting more expensive, I mean, obviously the economy's not doing well. And then we come under, the new president, and now the tariffs are going to make things far worse, and it's quite clear and obvious to see at this point. And then because the current president says that the economy's never been better and it was just the worst it's ever been under the last president, now some people just want to believe that. And it's like, that's just a shame, really. I mean, it really is a shame that people can't think with their own heads. Also, the stock market is crashing because everyone is getting rid of their stocks because most of the companies that have been making good profits to make those stock prices increase because people want to be in on that business, they're not going to be increasing because a lot of those companies rely on importing a lot of their goods or some sort of a part of the good that would, some sort of material that would help them to make a finished good. So with that in mind, prices are going to be rising across the board for everything. And so they're getting rid of their stocks because they know that the company is not going to be that successful. That's why a lot of people are doing that. Anyone who's involved in having anything imported right now is knowing that this is going to end up badly. It's just a fact of life. Like, if you don't want to believe that, you're living in denial. Like you're going to suffer with everyone else, and then you, instead of sitting there and saying, wow, it really is the tariffs, it'll be something else. Like, now we're hearing that apparently the scapegoat's now going to be globalists. And it's like, come on. It's like, that's just lame. It's like didn't someone else blame some certain group of people, for economic downturns because of, bad economic planning? Like, wasn't there a certain group of people that some guy in Germany said were like bankers and businessmen and stuff like that happened to run the country? And didn't he use like almost a similar kind of a scapegoat to explain the bad kind of a economic principle that this is being worked off of? It's like, come on. It's not, I'm not trying to make the comparison there. I'm just saying that that's almost the exact same kind of a thing. Like, if tariffs are going badly, they're going badly. There's no one to blame for that. The tariffs were levied, and then now bad things are happening as a result of that economically. So that's what the result is. Like, I'm not going to bullshit, and I'm not going to try and appease people who believe bullshit either. So, anyways, with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well. And with that, and also, someone said globalist is a code word for something else. Not really. Like, I'm not like I don't really know where they're going with any of that at all, but they're not doing that at all. Like, certainly not, because there's another thing that they're doing on the side, and it's just completely opposite. Like, I don't even know what they're doing at this point with that. But anyways, with that, I hope that does kind of address that well, or at least put in my 2 cents. I can
tell you that since we do run the merch store, obviously we do a little bit of buying goods and selling goods from time to time, and I've gotten messages from my suppliers that because of the tariffs, the costs are going up at least like 20%. So I can tell you for a fact that on our end, just on our little small merch store business, that it's definitely having an impact without a doubt. So, it is what it is, I guess you could say. Hopefully that gets sorted out sooner than later, because who's paying the price? Ultimately, it's us. It's the people. It's not the government's paying the price. It's going to be us. And I think that's what a lot of people that are really political don't understand, that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how strong you feel about a political party. When you're ultimately paying the cost in US dollars for what your decisions were, that's going to be on all of us, not just the other side that you don't like.
Also, I got to say this. I just want to say this, to be entirely honest with y'all. I'm not politically blind. Like, I did actually watch all the rallies that they had in the last election leading up to this one, and I was pretty sure. All right, I just want to make sure, because this was described on the description of the 10 that this president would come in and make everything affordable again. It was something, I don't know what it was. It was something along the lines of make America affordable again. I think that's exactly what was said, and they were saying that it was not affordable last year, and that's fairly true. So now we're going to make it even more unaffordable than last year, which was already supposedly unaffordable according to them. So now we're going to do that, and now that's a good thing according to people. And it's like, that is not a good thing, because it was already expensive last year. They ran on that premise last year, and now that they're in office, they're going to make things more expensive and then say people are just going to have to suck it up and take it. And as a matter of fact, things becoming more expensive is a good thing. Like, come on, that's just unreal. Like, that is actually insane, because they're either saying that the economy is doing great, or suck it up, and obviously things are going to be more expensive. You better just shut up and be happy with it. And it's like, wow, how appreciative to all the folks that went and voted on the idea that things would get cheaper to then make everything more expensive. Real big thank you to all of them, But anyways, with that, I hope that does kind of address that somewhat well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so jumping into our first super chat, the last segment here, because we're fresh out of polls for the moment. This one is going to go to Cotizable, who puts in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, Cotizable, for that support. And I believe that is your first ever super chat. And thank you very much for the massive 50. And they said, I'm a fair amount older, but don't hear as well. Informed commentary from most peers. Enjoy that. Enjoy that you did the math and found out the NYC subway was safe. That's rational.
And thank you so much for the support, Kadisable, and thank you for your first super chat ever. And also, I gotta say, thank you so much for enjoying the kind of like depths we go to research things and see what things are about. Like, I would say that me personally, I wouldn't feel safe in the New York City subway because of the tales and the legends that have been told of the New York City subway. But according to the statistics and numbers that they put out for last year, which is supposed to be an incredibly dangerous year, for the amount of ridership that there is on the subway, it wasn't really an incredibly deadly thing. It's really more deadly to get in a car than it is to get in the New York City subway. So that's actually kind of a little bit crazy when you think about it. And then people make it sound like the New York City subway is like a crime-ridden hellhole, and you still have a higher chance of dying in a car crash than anything. So I gotta say, a huge thanks to you so much once again for really appreciating that and enjoying that kind of insight or really research that we do, because we do that on everything. We do that on everything, crazy enough. Sometimes we don't do that on air, but we do that on air and off air, most of the time off air. And when we talk about the tariffs, that's largely, like our analysis on that is largely what we're seeing, based off of what we found off air. They're not good. They're punitive. Tariffs are punitive. That's what they are. And like, I see people always coming in here when I like throw in my 2 cents on that. That's not a good thing. And people want to say that it is a good thing, and we're just lying to them, or we're some sort of shills or something. It's really ridiculous, because I say that in their best interest, because I'm saying that it's going to become more expensive for those very people that are spitting in our face to live. And what do? Instead of going, really? Is that the case? Or, that's an interesting take, but I'm a little skeptical about it. They want to get violent and spit in our face for wanting to look out for what's best for them. People like that, I gotta say, like, I feel sorry for them, because I'm sure that most of them probably had a good shot at having a really decent kind of a lifestyle, but they're most likely nearly living under a bridge, because they cannot see it when people are screwing themselves, screwing them right to their face, and they'd rather just believe in some la-la land than actually face reality and accept the fact of what's going on. It's a very unfortunate thing with that, because I'm not I once again want to make it clear, we do not speak about any domestic political situation on this channel, but tariffs, as far as tariffs are concerned, is a foreign policy matter. It's one of the few things that we can actually talk about on this channel outside of the war in Ukraine and other kinds of foreign policy prerogatives of the United States. This is one of the few that we can bring up, and I've just never seen anything as destructive as the tariffs regimen that's been brought forward so far. We have 4 major trading partners: Canada, Mexico, the European Union, and China. And we have imposed massive tariffs on all 4 of those trading partners. They make up most of this nation's imports and exports in terms of trade. So not only, because everyone has pretty much mirrored our tariffs. So the Canadians have put 20% on the U.S. The Mexicans, I believe, have put 20% on the U.S. The European Union has as well. China has as well. So now not only are we able to import stuff, but American businesses that may have relied on exporting stuff are not able to do that either. Farmers are out there in the fields right now, and they are practically crying enough to water their own crops, because they can't afford fertilizers anymore that were coming from Canada, like potash, which was a very largely used agricultural fertilizer here in the United States. They don't even really have access to it, because it's now 20% more expensive and therefore unaffordable, because farmers live on a shoestring budget. That kind of a thing, it's not going to end up well. And I don't know why in the world this is being done, because simply put, we can't make potash in America. It just will not happen. So it's not like we can bring potash back to America. It just hardly was ever made here, ever. There's really not a way to do it. And it doesn't really make, also another thing is it doesn't really make a lot of sense to bring back industrial jobs when the United States has moved beyond an industrial economy. We are now a post-industrial economy, a services-based economy. Going back to an industrial economy is actually regressing instead of progressing. While we are wanting to revert back to being an industrial economy, the Chinese are wanting to really evolve into the post-industrial economy that we have right now. So it's like, if our enemies are wanting to have the same kind of economic system we have, like a post-industrial, services-based economy, why in the world do we think it would be so good to return back to what China is trying to escape right now? Like, it doesn't really make that much sense to me. And also, someone said, have you looked into the tariffs on U.S. exports? Yes, and I've explained that in great detail before. A lot of American automobiles do not meet European legal standards. That's why there's a tariff on them, is because if they're brought into Europe, there's a million things that have to be done to make them road legal inside of Europe. And in some other instances, there are other kinds of emission laws that are a lot more serious or stringent in Europe than they are inside the United States. So a lot of American cars built as they are in America are just not usable in Europe. So there are tariffs on them for that reason. There's also tariffs on other kinds of goods that do not meet European legal standards. That's just how it works. But that doesn't mean that you sit there and go, well, look at that, because like if it was doing us badly, like, here's my thing. If it was doing us badly to have trade deficits or to deal with countries that have tariffs on only specific American goods and actually we have to punish their entire nation for it, why in the world is the U.S. economy always climbing year after year? If we were doing something bad, we would see some sort of economic stagnation, and we do not see it. The Chinese are going through an economic stagnation. We are not. We are continuing to see the economy is growing exponentially at this point, which is showing us that whatever kind of trade agreements we have at the moment are actually beneficial for the United States and for us to be able to build up wealth in this country. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter if there's a 100% tariff on U.S. poultry entering Europe, as long as our trade is somehow benefiting the United States and helping us to continue to grow the tax base and continuing to grow the gross domestic product, and hopefully continuing to increase the quality of life of U.S. citizens. That is, at the end of the day, what we're looking for. We're not wanting to die on a moralistic hill of, well, they tariff our poultry products, so we want to tariff everything of theirs that comes into America, because that's not going to bode well. It's already not boding well with the stock market. I mean, you can go look at the Dow Jones and just go look at that for what it is. Like, it's not doing well at all. Look at that. That's doing horrendously. Pretty much all of the
doing terrible.
Pretty much all of the gains that have been seen from year to date have completely disappeared already. And we saw that the sanctions went into place on I believe it was the 5th of March, which was yesterday, and we're already starting to see that the economy has pretty much just started to completely spiral downwards and out of any kind of gains. That's already showing that a lot of companies are losing a decent amount of reserve capital because the stocks in these companies are being sold off and people are buying them up at a cheaper value if they're buying them at all, which means that a lot of these companies are going to have to start getting a little bit more lean, which means they're going to have to start laying off workforces, and they're going to have to they're going to have to produce less products, which means that there are less products to buy, which means that some of these products are going to become more expensive. A lot of them are already going to be more expensive because they're being imported from abroad. Citizens are going to be able to buy less because they have the same amount of money, but they have to buy less goods because they cost more. They're going to end up buying less, which means that these companies are going to have to end up becoming more lean, and it becomes pretty much a positive feedback loop where the economy just continues to get worse and worse off. That's how it works. And someone's about to come and say, I don't know how the economy works, and I'll tell you they don't know a damn of what they're talking about, because that's exactly how the economy works. Everything is revolving around trying to produce more goods and make people buy them. More goods and more people who have more money to buy those goods is the way the economy grows. So if there are less goods and there is less money to go around, or the goods are more expensive and everyone has the same amount of money, that equals economic shrinkage for the large part. It does not equal economic growth, and it doesn't even equal economic stability, or just an economic stagflation, if you want to call it that. So it's not good. I'm not saying that, and some people just will not get it, and it doesn't matter if I say this or not. I'm not saying this to try and get political at all. What I'm trying to say is, considering that our topic is foreign policy, that this is not going to do well. If people would wise up, no one is going to benefit from this. Everything's going to become more expensive, and we want things to be cheaper in this country. It's already insanely expensive as it is. I know that for a fact because no one in my generation is able to afford a damn thing in this country. They're not able to afford a house. They're hardly able to afford rent. They can hardly afford groceries. They can hardly afford time off for a vacation. The people in my generation live like slaves nearly at this point because of how expensive everything is. They practically have to work every day of the week, us included, to be able to try and just make ends meet. And we're incredibly fortunate here on this channel because we actually make a decent bit more than most people in our generation, and even still, we're struggling to get by. So I know that we do not want things to become more expensive, and that's being incredibly short-sighted and really screwing over my generation and the people of my age that are just entering into the United States and entering into the workforce, because they don't have a chance to get by at all at this point, much less if things become 20% more expensive largely across the board, or the economy starts to backslide rapidly. It's just not going to be a good thing. So with that, I hope that does address that well, maybe. I mean, it doesn't really matter. People are going to hate us for what we say, or they're going to already agree with us. So I'm largely just talking my voice into the wind at this point about this whole deal. But
I bet the most political people ever in the world will stop being political when they realize that those Benjamins are getting legs and they're running out of their wallet at a high speed.
Well, no, they'll probably sit there and say that it's someone else's fault. It can't be the guy they have in office, because of course everyone knows that politicians never lie, and they're always infallible, and they're always never wrong for anything. They're never at fault. It's honestly, folks. It is getting to the point that it feels hopeless at this point. Not because of the people in charge. It really feels hopeless because of the people who support the folks in charge, whether it's this guy or the last guy.
Also, by the way, Actual Case says, so how can we fix it? Honestly, the only way to fix this is to simply back off the tariff thing, back off of that. If the guy wants to address the trade issues around the world, which once again, there are trade issues, but there's always been trade issues. The idea is not to go around to every single country we're having a problem with and simultaneously slap massive tariffs on all of them at the same time. He should have addressed one country at a time instead of doing this simultaneously, because like the enforcer had mentioned, I think yesterday or today, that gives these countries basically collective bargaining power against the United States, and they can all band together and gang up on us because we've done this to all the countries at once. So we have to back off this current plan because it's obviously not working. It's going to only lead to economic destruction. And if it wants to be addressed still, this economic issue, try diplomacy first. That's probably the wisest thing to do. Don't just go in guns blazing when it comes to dealing with these economic issues. That's not smart. And then if you can't get anywhere from that point forward, start with a small tariff and slowly ratchet it up until you can get them to the negotiating table. But one country at a time, though, not everybody at once. This strategy right now, it's like nobody put any like thought or plan into it, and they're doing it like trial and error. But the only catch is the people they're going to be basically going on trial for the error is going to be the American people, which is not good.
Yeah, it's just a really it's just really crazy at this point. And also now I see people trying to blame the current party in charge. And I don't mean to make everyone unhappy with me in the room, but no, the other party that was in before this one is also to blame as well. I'm alive, I have eyes, and if y'all think my analysis on foreign policy is pretty good, most people think our analysis on domestic affairs sucks if we even get close to it, because, then at that point you don't deal with logic, it's all about emotions. But the last administration was doing fairly poorly as well for the economy in the last 2 years of their administration, much like this one was. And I got to be honest with y'all, I was getting a little bit aggravated with that because inflation was starting to get a little bit out of hand. It was getting out of hand, and the price of groceries and many things were starting to get out of control. The price of gas was rising through the roof, and then that guy also said, "Look, Jack, the economy's never been better," and then people just agreed with him, and that was it. It just kept getting worse. And they just agreed with the guy and ignored it. And he did terrible at it. He hardly did anything to try and even manage it or pretend like he was managing it. And now the current one is deliberately going out of his way, pretty much to say that things are going to be getting more expensive due to his actions, and people are just going to have to live with it.
These last two presidents we've had are just awful. I'm not going to lie to you. These last two presidents, I don't care obviously I have a political leaning. I'll say just as myself, I don't know how everybody else feels. These last two presidents have been not what you'd call model citizens, to be perfectly honest with you. And not only that, but they lack common sense. Both of them do. And they're also way too damn old. It's like, do we not have anybody that wants to run for office that's a little bit younger, that has some common sense and a little bit of energy in their system, that isn't bitter and deranged, that wants to run for office? Because, we could probably use that about right now.
Yeah, we probably could. And also, Matthew, look, we're getting them riled up. Someone say, "You're full of shit." Well, nah, not as much as you, man. Like, you're literally so full of it, you're throwing it up. But beyond that, it's just been horrendous. Like if you look at this neutrally, it's horrendous. But what's great about America these days is that no one ever looks at it neutrally and goes, "Wow, everything's been mismanaged during the last administration and this one." Some people want to say, "Oh, the last administration was perfect." And also then some people want to say this one's perfect. The reality is that both of them have been pretty pretty bad. Like, both of them are terrible, in my opinion. And I've never seen anything like it. Like, I'm not speaking just on the foreign policy level with both of those. I'm actually really speaking on everything with both of those, the domestic and the foreign policy stuff, and the diplomacy side of things. It's been horrendous. I've just never seen mismanagement like this before, ever. And it's crazy to make them sound like they're even different. Because if you go through and you start to really, like grocery list each thing that these people have done, it's just insane. Like, you just don't see stuff like this in any other presidency. Like, the last president giving himself and his family full pardons for everything done over the past 10 years, literally whatever it is, just getting a pardon for all of them, including himself. I mean, that's just wild. I mean, like, that kind of stuff is crazy. And then the current one ran a crypto scam right before he got in office. I mean, like, it's like no one's ever done these kinds of things before, and it's just happening on all ends, and you can't speak reason on that sort of thing and say, wow, look at all of this crookery that's going on, because people don't want to hear it. Like, people are just dead set, I got to support this guy like it's the Alabama college football team on either end, and I just cannot ever hear anything about anything that doesn't sound good about my people, which is just absolutely insane to me. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well, at least in my opinion. And with that, it is time for us to move on into the questions themselves. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so moving back into our super chat questions. Once again, thank you for Codizable support, for that $50 donation, and we appreciate it. And we also have a 50 from none other than Old Warrior. And thank you, Old Warrior, as well, for that support, and we appreciate it as well. He's a longtime channel legend. He said, one of the main reasons I watch is as a teen of the 60s, we're passing the torch of reason on.
Hey, and I gotta thank you so much for the support and the kind words as well. And hopefully, the torch is being passed on. Hopefully, it sounds like we're making sense. Every single time I even get close to covering a domestic political topic, there's at least 5 people that go legitimately insane in the chat. Like this one guy called Rocky, who said, "You guys are idiots," in all caps. Probably because we called out his party along with the other one at the same time. Yeah, exactly that reason. It's a. Like, folks, I got to be honest with y'all. I had a lot of hope for this country when I first started running this channel because I didn't have to be exposed to the masses of people out there in this country. I'm going to be honest with y'all. I think the country might actually have a really rough time of continuing on and surviving because of the people living in the country at this point, like on all ends. There's crazy people who are Republicans and Democrats, and I'll be honest with y'all, those groups are running this country into the ground. Like, it's just clear for anyone to see if you have eyes. And if you're one of the people who do not see that and are going to get violent for me saying that, you're the problem. Like, you are the problem in this country. It's not the people who were elected. It's not the president of the United States. It's not the last president of the United States. They got into those positions because of people like y'all. It is entirely the fault of the citizenry and the voters that this country continues to have worse and worse candidates for the president and then get worse and worse results from each election. It is absolutely crazy.
You know, it's honestly a little bit more complex than that, I would say, because, you know, I think a big problem these days is a lot of people don't pay attention to their primary process, because the way it works is there's a primary for the left side and the right side, obviously. And also there's the independents, but, you know, they're kind of like a spoiler, unfortunately, to the whole thing. They're not really standing a chance of winning, but they spoil one side or the other, depending on which one it falls on. But a lot of people don't pay attention to their primary process, and they should, because obviously the primary is how you pick your candidate that ultimately goes on the presidential ticket, which is what the vast majority of voters end up actually voting for, is that actual presidential ticket. And, you know, if there's more people focused on the primaries, maybe they could try to weed out the bad ones early. But even at that, the people are focused on the wrong things. They want to hear one-line zingers on the other side, like, oh, he got him good with that one. They're not really interested in hearing policy points because it's boring. And that's also a danger as well, because you need people to be educated to understand the policy points. And if they're not, and if people are generally just wanting to hear one-line zingers and insults being lobbed at the other side, that leads to really lack of logic people getting elected with no common sense. Which is kind of what it is now. So, you know, that's part of the problem.
Also, someone said that the people don't pick the candidates. I don't know what country you're from, because they do. Because there's a pool of candidates that are had every 4 years for the president. We're not even speaking about the Congress, for the Republicans and the Democrats, and they go through this thing called the primaries, which is where the members of those political parties pick their candidate. So yes, the people do pick their candidate that actually runs for both of those parties by the time it actually gets to the presidential election. It's not the parties that pick them, it's the people of those parties, the voters pretty much, who are picking their final candidate to actually run for the office of the president. So that's how it works. Like yes, people, like the voters themselves, especially extremists on both ends, are to blame for the poor presidencies that we've seen under this presidency and the last one, in my opinion. Like, sorry if that pisses you off, and sorry if you want to unsubscribe, but I'm being as fair as I can be here. Like, I'm pretty much going at both sides still, like we always have, but it's getting incredibly annoying these days to really see that it's not actually the government that's really at fault for most of it. It's really gullible people, and also people who are really ignorant and a little bit too extreme for their own good or for the nation's good, that really are to blame for a lot of this. Like that's really what it comes down to. So with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well. I don't even care if it addresses it fairly well. That's my piece on it. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one goes to Margaret Hemsley, who puts in a $31 donation. And thank you very much, Margaret, as well, for being a longtime channel legend and helping to keep the channel running. And Margaret said, live chat question, please.
And I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it rolling. And so, Matthew, what do we got for a live chat?
All right. Also, by the way, someone said, well, there wasn't really a primary in the last election. That's true. A lot of people were not happy with that, by the way. It doesn't matter what political side of the aisle you fall on. I know people from every political side of the aisle, and nobody was happy about that because, once again, they bypassed the primary, and that's not a good thing. That's not really what you'd call democratic. So, you know, if there's people out there that are fine with that, then I don't think you understand how it should really work, because that's just a simple function of the election. So, you know, nobody was really happy with that. But anyways, getting to that live chat question that Margaret Hemsley was mentioning, this one is going to go to Coder for Liberty, who says, does it matter to you guys if China and others take all the manufacturing or not?
It does matter if those countries are adversaries to the United States of America, but if other countries get the manufacturing industries or jobs from the United States, say countries that are neutral or friendly to the United States like Mexico, then it isn't really a bad thing. If anything, it's lowering the cost of labor, and it's making it cheaper for these products to be sold inside the United States. So it doesn't really matter that much to me, because really the reality is, like, people just don't think this inside the United States. It sounds so great to have say a steel mill back in the United States. What American is going to go work in a steel mill? I mean, there's not really that many who do want to do that. And to them, I commend them, because it's actually a very important and crucial job for the nation. It's a strategic kind of an industry for the large part. But there's no kids growing up in school anymore that are going to go, wow, I would really love to be a steel worker, you know, running a rolling press. Nobody in school ever said that. Like, nobody was going, wow, I cannot wait to work some blue-collar industrial job at some factory. Like, nobody says that in America anymore. And that's one thing that people don't get. If you're not able to hire anyone inside the United States for these industries or these manufacturing jobs because no one wants them, you then have to raise the pay to try and incentivize people to come work for you, which means that cost of labor is now a lot higher, which means the end cost of that good is going to be significantly higher. Now, a lot of people don't like to think about it like this, but this is the reality here, is that in Mexico, their wages are insanely lower than even the minimum wage here in the United States. So you can get the Mexicans to pump out steel like no one's business, and it's incredibly cheap if you wanted steel from Mexico, or say an automobile or something like that, because there are many Mexicans that would like to have those jobs. They're a lot better than the jobs that they currently have. They're better paying, even if in America the pay is pretty much next to nothing, or it's crumbs. For the Mexicans, it's pretty good pay, and they pump out the goods. They're shipped into the United States, and the cost is cheap. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked. Because back in the day when the United States was an industrial nation, there were many other industrial nations around the world, but something that a lot of people do not know is that American goods were far more competitive than really the only area in the world that was industrialized at the time, European goods, because in Europe, just to explain this is something that is a good thing and a bad thing depending on how you look at it, but In Europe, labor unions formed a lot quicker than they did in America, and they were a lot more effective in Europe, a lot faster historically than they were in America. So the workers of Europe were able to get themselves higher wages and more benefits, which did end up increasing the cost of labor inside of most European countries. And considering that the only industrial areas of the world at this point was Europe and the United States, that meant that the United States had an upper hand advantage because Americans largely worked for less pay than their European counterparts, and that means that the cost of labor, that was the end cost involved in all American goods, was cheaper, meaning that people would rather buy American goods at the time than European goods, because in the end, American goods were decent quality. I mean, they weren't as good as European goods. I mean, even today, a lot of people know that generally people would like to get European goods because they're viewed to be of higher quality. But beyond that, American goods were of decent quality, and of course, they were cheaper. And so a lot of people wanted to buy American goods. That's why if you look at a map of, say, the main import partner of any country in the world in the 1960s, everyone's main import partner was the United States, because we had the cheapest and also decent quality goods for the time. Things changed, though, because as labor unions started to really catch on in America, not to say that that was the only thing that doomed the United States industrially, but also just the general shift of the economy into a post-industrial kind of an economy, the price of goods being manufactured in the United States started to become uncompetitive. And a lot of countries out there, like South Korea and Japan, China, and many others, started to position themselves to where they could get these goods produced at a cheaper cost because the labor was cheaper and the raw materials were cheaper. So that incentivized a lot of those companies to leave the United States because the cost of labor was higher and also the cost of resources was higher. So they left the United States and they would go over to places like South Korea, Japan, and China. Or largely those companies would just grow to fill in the void that was now existing in America because those manufacturing industries disappeared for those reasons. So it's not really it's not something that you can get back. Like it's done with, it's over. Like you cannot go back. You can only go forward from here. So trying to bring all of those people back, it's just not going to work. And on top of that, if they do come back, they're killing their market share because a lot of these American companies are international. Companies like Ford, they sell cars in Europe. They largely sell European cars in Europe, but still, the Ford Motor Company does produce and sell cars internationally. And if they come back to the United States, the cost of labor and importing all of the raw materials, which would still be subject to a 20% tariff, at least at this point, is going to make their vehicles and systems completely non-competitive outside of the U.S. economy. In the U.S. economy in a bubble, they will be comparable or at least competitive, but in an international market, which is where a lot of these businesses thrive these days, it's not just an American market, they're never going to be able to compete. Companies like Peugeot and Vauxhall and BMW and Mercedes would be killing them in the European market at that point. No one would even get close. And so a lot of these American companies, if they do move back to the United States, they are practically sacrificing any market share that they have anywhere else in the world except for the United States of America. So then a lot of those companies are going to end up shrinking significantly because of that as well. And not only that, they're not going to be able to bring in the wealth that they once brought in back to the United States because they're not going to be getting in on that sweet cash that could be had in, say, a European market or an Eastern Asian market. So those are kind of like the big concerns at this point with this kind of a thing. And that's why I would still say it's not a good idea to move forward with this kind of a concept or a plan with tariffs. Like none of it works in reality or practice. That's why we really cannot bring them back.
Also, if you remember, back around 2019, I think it was, somewhere around that point, the same thing happened with the tariffs with China. And y'all might remember there was a very, very big row behind the scenes between the U.S. and China over that tariff issue then back in 2019, almost 5 years ago. And it nearly brought China and the United States to the brink of war. It simply wasn't publicized in the media because they were holding closed-door meetings about it. But it came out after the fact, I believe in around 2020 or early 2020, that China was close to basically aggressing on the United States over the issue. And honestly, I wouldn't say I was too far from the truth because we're seeing China do the same thing right now. They're threatening direct war with the United States over the tariff situation. And they're saying they're willing to do a tariff war and also another war, a real war, if they want that as well. So China doesn't really mess around at all when it comes to the tariff situation. And of course, the situation is unfair between China and the United States. There's no doubt about that. But at the same time, though, we got to sort of play it smart when it comes to doing it with these countries like China.
Yeah, that's largely true. Also, it looks like someone said I was wrong on everything. If you could explain how, you've been around for a while, so I'm going to give you like a little bit of a like a pass on that. If you could explain how I'm wrong, I'd like to know. I generally, I'll just say though, that's usually grounds for a ban if you just say I'm wrong and incredibly ignorant and you don't even explain why. But I'm going to give you a pass because you've been here for a while, and I'm actually going to ask you how am I wrong, and it has to be an actual explanation. You don't have to tell me, well, because jobs are going to come back. If it's something that basic, then that may be your last day here. But if you actually have a reason for why I'm wrong that is rational and it is sensible and it actually works in a realistic framework, please explain. But anyways,
take off your jacket and leave Hell's Kitchen.
Yeah, like honestly, I was getting to that point because I'll be honest. Every time someone comes in here and says we're wrong, I ask, how are we wrong? And there's never a complex answer as to why we're wrong. Like the complex answer I give as to how it works. So I hope that there is one in this instance. But anyways. With that, I hope that does address that well, and I do thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to none other than Michael Smith, who puts in a very generous $30 donation. And thank you very much, Michael Smith, for that support. He put in a 30 Australian, by the way, and he's from Australia. He puts in the YouTube lemon creature. It loves the rose bush that we're looking at right here in the super sticker. But thank you very much, Michael, for helping keep the channel running, and we appreciate that very much. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I love to hear that the lemon fellas enjoying the roses, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible and keep it running. We wouldn't be able to sit around and smell the roses like we are right now. But still, a huge thanks to you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. But a huge thank you so much once again, Michael Smith.
Yes, indeed. And our next one here goes to Jacob Wasaki, who puts in a $20 donation as well. And thank you very much, Jacob, also for that generous support. And he said, good evening, gents, and good evening, Jacob. He said, what realistic scenarios outside of trading Chris's mom would result in Ukraine walking away with all their territory, regardless of the probability?
There really isn't one at this point. I don't really think there's a way for the Ukrainians to get back all of their territory unless they were actually able to militarily retake it in major offensives, and I just do not think that that ever will happen. While the Ukrainians are having a major amount of offensive success relative to this period in the war, it's not that kind of offensive success that actually would see them split the land bridge in two, retake Crimea, and retake the Donbass. So if anything, the land that could be given back to them would have to be given back through diplomatic concessions by the Russian Federation. And I do not think that there's going to be that many diplomatic concessions with what we're looking at right now, which is honestly incredibly annoying and not really fair. But once again, we're kind of having to play the cards we're dealt with at this point. But still, I got to say, I hope that does address that well, and I thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one. But thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running.
And let's hit this poll real quick. We got a poll that's been running for 27 minutes. It says, are the U.S. tariff wars going to hurt the average American or help them? 78% said it's just going to destroy people, while 22% said it's going to help. And honestly, I would have to say, and this is just as neutral as possible. And once again, just to like say this, because this isn't even political. I literally don't really have a political party. I'm an independent, so I don't even go one way or the other when it comes to leaning left or right. So it's pretty much whatever's common sense is what I go for, and that's not even political. That's just saying it how I feel, really, honestly. But I'm going to have to say that the tariff wars is going to destroy people. I can say that pretty confidently. It's already starting to do that, and I think we might see the tariff wars get rolled back, at least in part, in the coming weeks. That would be very smart to do that very quickly. And honestly, it'd be a really smart thing to roll it back completely until a real plan is developed by the current U.S. administration, because I have no problem with them addressing the issue. It's just, the way they're going about it seems to be a little bit too wild and loose, which could end up hurting the American people. So I would say I'm going to be with the 78%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to be with the 78% full on. Once again, a lot like Matthew, I'm more down the middle. If anything, might be an independent, but I don't really vote much really for anyone, to be entirely honest. But to answer what my idea is on the tariffs, doing it in this way is a bad idea. Now, I am not one to say that a political idea is a bad idea, because really, in terms of morality, there really is no right or wrong answer, because if there was, then why in the world is the country divided on what's the right answer? That's really how I look at it. So with what we're hearing right now, the current president of the United States wants to make fairer trade deals for the United States, or he wants to bring back industrial manufacturing to the United States. As far as that idea, industrial manufacturing being brought back to the United States, that might as well just be forgotten. That's just never going to happen, and I already explained why that wouldn't work. So, just forget that one. But as far as trying to negotiate good trade deals or try and renegotiate current trade arrangements to make them more beneficial to the United States, we should have gone into those negotiations and tried to talk it out and then threaten tariffs if they just wouldn't budge, and then see if that would make them budge in negotiations. But going in and putting down tariffs first and foremost, you really have kind of skipped the whole negotiating process and went straight into consequences without even giving a chance to see if this could all be just largely forgone with, and we wouldn't have to go through this. That's how I largely look at it, because I would have to say that as far as the President of the United States saying that every single trade arrangement is not a good one for the United States, I mean, in some instances, he's not exactly wrong. I mean, there are some trade arrangements out there that are lopsided, but it's not enough to quite honestly try and implode the entire U.S. economy over it. Of course, you could try and revisit them and try and change them, but you largely have to do that through, great gift of the gab, a good act of diplomacy, trying to negotiate, possibly leverage the idea of tariffs during the negotiations. Those are the kinds of things that you would want to do. But going into this and just throwing out 20% tariffs at a minimum on all four of our major trading partners, out of all four of them have massive tariffs leveraged against them, it's not going to end up well. And also on top of that, you have to look at this as, if all of these countries are weaker than the United States, combined, they're actually stronger than the United States in this arrangement. We've practically given them all collective bargaining power at this point. If the President of the United States wanted to go along this route of levying tariffs against someone and then letting them negotiate their way out of them, it would have been a lot more effective to do this one-on-one. So the United States tariffs Canada, keeps the tariffs going, pretty much gets into a trade war, and then they negotiate their way out of it or renegotiate some sort of a trade arrangement to where they're satisfied, and then they drop the tariffs. Then they move on to Europe and do that to them. But not all at the same time, because really in the end, all these countries will be affected somewhat, but America's going to be affected the most. Because for Canada, they only have sanctions with one country now. Well, not sanctions, but tariffs with one country now, which is the United States. And for Mexico, they have tariffs on them put by the United States. The United States has tariffs towards everyone and from everyone from Canada, the European Union, Mexico, and China, which is 4 countries that we're in a trade war with right now, and each one of these countries individually is only in a trade war with the United States alone, meaning that for most other people, as far as trade partners are concerned, they have a lot more options and we have almost none. So we practically, in this kind of a situation, we've practically given everyone that we say we have an issue with trade-wise collective bargaining power, where they can all just kind of hold out and watch the United States economy fizzle out at this point and just kind of watch. And that's not an incredibly kind of a good position to be in. Like, of course, wanting to make this a little bit clear, I don't like the idea of putting tariffs, especially at this moment, on any of our allies at all, Canada, Mexico, or the EU. I'm 100% putting behind them on, I'm 100% behind putting these on the Chinese. I actually think that was a very good idea, but putting them on the Canadians, the Mexicans, and the EU at all wasn't really that great of an idea, in my opinion. And also, not only that, but doing it at this very moment in time was not a good idea. And it's not going to end up boding us well at all moving on into the future. But it doesn't matter, because as long as people think they're doing fine and they're poor and they're starving, then, they're doing fine, I suppose. But that would be my opinion and take on it for the large part. And also another thing, because, I'm not ignorant or anything. The President of the United States said that he was going to get rid of all income taxes and every other kind of tax inside the United States and just replace it with tariffs. And we're still paying taxes this year because taxes still have to be paid. And we also have the tariffs now. So it's pretty much like I was telling Matthew behind the scenes, because we talked about this before. I said the income taxes and all the other kind of taxes, they're not going away. So instead of getting screwed by the government in one way, now we're getting screwed by the government in 2 ways. Everything's more expensive expensive, and we're also still paying taxes. So it's
and honestly, that's why we're discussing it, really, because honestly, I'll be straight up honest. The tariff situation in the economy has got me worried right now. Like, I think it's got a lot of people worried. It's most people that I speak to in my personal life, they're worried about this quite significantly, and they're from both sides of the political aisle. So when I see people out there that are like vehemently like, "Oh, this is going to work," I know 100%. It's like you have to have at least some doubt that this might not work, because this is a very like wild and risky strategy here, and it's a big gamble. It's like, you know, if it was a gamble that you were taking in a business, that would be one thing, because of course the business would pay the price if it goes wrong. But the people, the entire country, 350 million people, are going to pay the price if this gamble goes wrong. And that's why you can't make gambles like this when you're dealing with the entire country, because it affects the little guy. And when the little guy gets affected, that's when big problems start happening, because once again, they have to have money to eat and simply pay for the necessities. And that's just not an acceptable risk to me, to be wild and loose.
Yeah, it's just not going to end up well. I mean, that's the best way I could say it. It's just not going to end up well. But you know, people are never going to believe that, even when things are not going well. Some people will just never even listen to reason. Kind of like under the last president, no one listened to reason when the economy wasn't doing well. Then everyone, the supporters of that president, wanted to say everything was fine and everything was perfect and it's all good, and it wasn't good at all. It was terrible. And like, it was getting terrible towards the end. And now we got a new president, and it's getting even worse. And then people want to say that's in fact better than ever, really just because they're guys in power, and it doesn't really have to do at all with what the actual situation is. But anyways, with that, I hope we addressed that well. It's not like, I'll be honest, folks, it's not even worth discussing it, because in this kind of a category, even though this is still foreign policy and we're trying to speak about it as neutrally as possible, at this point, a lot of people view this as a domestic political thing. So it doesn't really matter what I say, because either y'all already have it in your minds that you pretty much agree with what I'm saying, so you're going to like it and agree with it, or people already are 100% behind the president on this, and they just don't care if it does us bad or good, and they're going to just be dead on behind the president. So it doesn't even really matter if we discuss it at all, because it's not like we're changing anyone's minds or influencing anyone at all. Everyone has their mind made up already. But anyways, with that, I hope that kind of addresses that somewhat, and we're on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Tony Coles, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Tony Coles, for that support, and we appreciate it. I believe, let me check here, that is Tony's first ever super chat, and he put in 20 New Zealand. And thank you very much, Tony, for that. We appreciate it. He said, "Hi, guys. New Zealand's foreign minister has sacked the country's envoy to the United Kingdom after he made comments seen as critical of the U.S. president."
And wait a minute, reread that one again?
They said New Zealand's foreign minister has sacked the country's envoy to the United Kingdom after he made comments seen as critical of the U.S. president.
Huh, that's interesting. I thank you for the support and sharing that with us. I have actually not heard of that before, but that's very interesting to hear, Tony Coles. And I really don't know a lot about that situation to make a comment on it, but I do thank you for sharing that with us, and I'll try and look into it a little bit more. But still, thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. Hope that does address that incredibly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right. Also, real quick, let's hit this poll real quick while we're not too far away from the topic. This was a question that I was curious to see the answer to. The poll says, would you be in favor of the U.S. tariff wars if U.S. federal income tax was eliminated? So 76% said no, they would not be in favor of the tariff wars anyway, and 25% said yes. And this is assuming that, you know, the two are connected. That's a big assumption to make, because, of course, there's some debate as to whether or not those two are actually connected, which, you know, I'm going to refrain from my opinion on that. But I would say, generally speaking, I would say no. I think the damage caused by the tariff wars is going to exceed the savings from eliminating the federal income tax for the average person. So I'm going to say no. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say no as well to that. I don't believe that is a good idea, because the thing is that the government has to generate revenue somehow, and you know, if there is no way to generate revenue, if there are no tariffs levied, and then there's also income tax is just eliminated, then the government is making no revenue whatsoever, because income tax is one of the major ways that the government generates revenue to be able to pay its expenses, such as upkeeping the military, paying for infrastructure, those kinds of things. So there has to be some sort of revenue generation. And, simply put, it wouldn't make any sense at all to really impose tariffs. We could just keep the current system we have running, even with how unpopular it is. I'm one of the people who really don't like paying income tax, but we still have to pay it nevertheless. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to, let's take a look. This one goes to United Kempo Martial Arts Academy, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Mr. United Kempo, for that support. We appreciate it. They said, do you think Europe can step up and make up for the U.S. withdrawn support in Ukraine? And are they capable of expanding their own military and helping Ukraine at the same time?
That's a very tough answer, United Kempo. And I'd largely have to say that the answer to that is mostly no for now, unfortunately, because we've been able to hear that there's been a lot of talk. There was a lot of talk from the European countries that they would be able to float and support Ukraine on their own and remilitarize, but the reality started to come out even after those bravado statements were made that they really are not ready for that right now, and it's going to take several years to get to that point, meaning that they're behind the curve. So at this very point in time, which is when it matters the most, the answer to that is really no. So I hope that addresses that somewhat well on that end. But as far as remilitarizing right now, the Europeans can take care of that right now. They can start the process at this very moment. It's just that it will take several years for them to be able to get up to the heights or abilities that they would want to be at. But still, that's always how it works with militarization or mobilization, whichever way you want to call it. So I hope that does address that somewhat well, at least in my opinion. And I do thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep it running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible and keep it running. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Margaret Hemsley. Once again, thank you, Margaret, for that $15 support, and we appreciate that second support of the night. And she said, answer Bobby Caralfa's question, please. And it looks like Margaret has sponsored Bobby's question. So let me scroll up and see if I have his question in the spreadsheet. I'm scrolling through here and taking a peek, and it looks like I don't have Bobby's question up here. So since she did sponsor that live chat question, Bobby Caralfa, if you are in the chat, tag at Enforcer Matt and put your question behind it, and we will return back to it momentarily. But Enforcer, what say you?
I do have to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel keep on running. If we do get Bobby Caralfa's question, we will make sure to answer it. But if we don't get one, I'm not exactly sure what we're going to do about that, to be entirely honest. But I do thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who make this channel keep going round. And so with that, big thanks to you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
And we have a $10 super chat from Upset Waffle. And thank you, Upset Waffle, for that support and helping to keep the channel running. And they said, LSA, Slava Ukraine. And my father was a tabbed ranger. He served in the 80s in the Gulf War. And he would have loved y'all's channel and how y'all stand up for the values he served to defend. And LSA.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support. And LSA. And also very kind words to say right there, and really cool to hear that he was a ranger. That's incredibly neat, actually. But beyond that, I thank you so much for the kind words on that. We try and stand up for what we think is the best for Americans. Like, just to be honest, like, I don't mean to sound like a doomer at this point, but, you know, like honestly, just even getting singed by the current political atmosphere in this country is just enough for me, to be entirely honest. It doesn't really seem like a lot of people care about America's interest at this point. Like, I speak on an entirely neutral level, which means that, you know, I'm not going to agree with everything everyone does in the office of the president or what the government does. I speak for what I think would be the best for Americans. And I try and say in a very heartfelt way to folks, because I know that a lot of people listen to us, that this thing with the tariffs isn't really going to be doing us well, and it's not really going to be leading to the kind of prosperity that Americans should be looking for and that the government should be trying to get for them. And then people want to get angry with me that I'm trying to, you know, say something that I think is a fairly pertinent point. I'm not saying that the current president's terrible. I'm not saying that the last president was a saint. But what I am saying is that this isn't going to turn out well. And also another thing is that this is foreign policy. Like, if some people want to make that sound like it's political, it isn't. It's a foreign policy thing. This channel covers a lot of what U.S. and Western foreign policy and diplomacy actions look like. This falls amongst that. So we're trying, you know, to explain something I think is a fairly important thing to a lot of people. You know, it's going to impact all of y'all. I'm not trying to say it to bash your guy. Like, I don't know why you love him so much. I mean, you probably never even met the guy. But what I'm trying to tell you is that it's not going to end up well. And maybe it would be good to, you know, maybe see that and come around too before you really start to get hit by it badly. That's what we're trying to say. really sad to see that the country has gotten to this state, because I just never believe, like, I've always believed the entire time I've run this channel, and really it's because we've never even touched anything at all close to what people would call political. We've always avoided it like the plague, and it's just really just so crazy to see that so many people just are just that violent and vehement and dogged, and they don't have any sense or reason or anything. Like, the political landscape at this point, it's just a cesspit. Like, honestly, it almost seems like a total loss. It's just nuts. But anyways, I do thank you so much for the support and the kind words, because we try our best on this channel, look out for American and Western interest, and to try and think about what would be the best for the U.S. citizenry and what would see the most prosperity for every citizen of the United States. And so with that, thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that somewhat well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and jumping into our next question here, this one goes to David Carnes, also known as Raid, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, David, for that support, and we appreciate it very much. And he said, LSA.
And LSA, and thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it rolling. And so with that, a big thank you to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Scott Kemp, who puts in a 10. And huge shout out to Scott for always supporting the channel once again, and we appreciate it, Scott. He said, can Putin tell Iran to attack other countries and expect them to obey?
I don't think he can really just tell them, like, order them like a dog to stick them. But, you know, I think he could ask them to do something, possibly in Russia's support, in exchange for some benefits that the Russians may provide to him. I think that that's really how it would work in between the two. So, kind of in a sense, yes, they could do that. But still, thank you so much once again for support and helping us to keep this channel running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, I ran a quick poll, and also, by the way, we're not like getting into like the politics of the parties and stuff like that. I was just curious at this point, where do people generally stand? What do you consider yourself that watches your stream? Because YouTube actually, I don't believe, collects that data. That would not be something YouTube has in their statistics. So I've always been curious. I'm like, where do people stand with this? Just out of my own curiosity. So I was looking at it, and honestly, I would say that I'm not too shocked by that. Once again, I don't care which party you're from. This channel advocates for America's interests. And once again, Ukraine is in America's interest to support. And if you're from the left, right, or whatever, we're simply glad to have you on board. Like, we've never really cared about that one bit. So, you know, we're not one of these channels that goes out and is like, oh, like they're a fake Ukraine supporter because they're from this party or another. That's not what we do at all. We're just simply looking out for the interests of this country. And that's it. So, very interesting results. And that's actually somewhat actually the way I expected it to be. A lot more independence than I thought, though. I will say that. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'm not going to lie. I'm actually shocked with the amount of independence. Like, I didn't think it was like that. Like, to be honest with y'all, in my head, I've always assumed that it was like 50-50 Republicans and Democrats. That's why I've always had in my head running the channel. It kind of looks like that. Honestly, it's not really exactly like that. But beyond that, there's an insanely higher amount of independence than I ever imagined. I mean, it's like half the channel, at least according to the poll. So I'm like, wow, that's a lot of people. But beyond that, I got to say, once again, like Matthew was saying, this channel looks out for the best interest of the United States of America and also the West's interests as a whole. We really do not care if you are a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent. I don't really care if you're a Tory or Labor Party member. I don't care what political party you affiliate with in Germany or any other country for that matter. As long as you believe and support American and Western interests, you're entirely welcome here on this channel. And we always try and make our statements in the mindset of supporting American and Western interests. I don't really like to view myself as an independent even, or a Republican or a Democrat. What I try and view myself as is someone who is most concerned for the United States of America itself. And I put the United States of America and its well-being and the well-being of its people, which is what the nation is, well above any kind of political affiliation. I don't like to toe party lines. Those party people would throw me to the curb and make me choke to death in a puddle if it meant that they could get ahead. So I'm not really for any of those people. I'm more so for all of y'all. And I like to think that hopefully that shows through in how we cover the news on this channel. I kind of sound a little bit downtrodden. Matthew told me that over text a second ago, and I really do, because it's honestly just really discouraging sometimes to see that we try and say things for the best interest of the people, and sometimes folks just don't want to listen to that at all. It's not like I'm trying to, become political and act like, the Republicans or the Democrats are just amazing, perfect people, and the other party is a terrible group of dogs. Like, I'm not for that. That just doesn't make any sense, because at the end of the day, we're all either succeeding or we're failing. Like, that's how I look at it. So
our words will probably change very few minds. And once again, we're not necessarily trying to change your minds. Like, you vote however the hell you want to vote. That's up to you. It's an American freedom. But I think people, I think the policies will do the work for us, because if you put your hand on a hot stove and then you get burned and you yank your hand off of it, obviously you're not going to keep your hand on the stove. So if people realize, hey, look, I'm going broke under these current policies, I might want to vote different. If people are not, smart enough to vote different, and once again, if it turns out A-okay, like the policies turn out good, well, we're proven wrong, and you vote however you want, keep voting that way if you want. But if people will get their hand burned on the stove and then they go to vote a different party or something like that because they didn't like the policies, that'll do the majority of the legwork for people, I think, because most of the time people have to learn through hard lessons and usually not through the words alone. And I think that's probably what's going to end up happening this time.
Yeah, I think so. But hopefully we'll be able to see that the best thing ends up happening for the United States of America, whatever it may be. But, I always try and make sure, in my opinion, to look out for what the best interest is of the country. Like, I'm not really one of those people who gets into the moralistic groundwork of the political parties, or, who did more blow in the Oval Office, or, who ran a crypto scam or anything like that. All that kind of stuff. Like, it's very distasteful and illegal. But beyond that, that kind of stuff is really just not important. What is important is what y'all's well-being and what y'all's welfare looks like. That's what I care about. That's why, that's why this channel's existed the way it has for 3 years. So if you like it until we talk about this tonight, you've been liking this exact same kind of mindset that's leading me to say what I'm saying tonight right now. But like Matthew says, we're not going to change anyone's minds. People's minds are made up. We're a little voice to people. Like that's the reality of it, is that we're a little voice to most people. Like, most people, they love the president of the United States, or they hate him. And so whatever we say, like, whether we support some of his actions, and what's even crazier is that, like, on some of the current president's actions, I've stated that I actually don't think that they're that bad of an idea. Like I said, if Chinese influence couldn't be removed from Panama, it may be in America's interest to retake the canal, and tariffs against the People's Republic of China is a good idea. I say things neutrally. Like, if they're a good idea, they're just a good idea. Like, I'm not going to sit there and try and make it sound like someone's a devil. I mean, if they have a pretty decent plan, or at least something that's been done, I'll go, wow, that's pretty good. And people don't get that, because what people think, well, what people think is just whatever they selectively hear. Like, if I say something like the president's tariffs against Canada, Mexico, and the EU are terrible, they don't care. These people do not care if I said that some of the ideas or actions of the president, in my opinion, in other ways are good. They don't give a shit. They just hear that I said I disagreed with this guy on one thing, and they're going to come for me. That's just how it's working at this point with that kind of situation. It was like that with the last guy, too. Some people would act like that over the last president. But honestly, it's more so the case now with this president than it was with the last guy. Honestly, we could say whatever we wanted about the last guy in foreign policy and what he was doing, and really almost nobody cared. But with the current guy right now, I can say almost the same kind of assessments or opinions, and I'll be like, I don't really like that kind of an action that this guy made right here, and people want to just get down my throat. Like they act like I have to agree with everything the guy does and act like it's perfect and it's sunshine and rainbows. In America, it wasn't made to be that way, and it's not that way. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well, at least in my opinion. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Danny B. It is Chef Danny who comes in with a $20 support. And thank you very much, Danny, for the support. Hey! And also, I'm glad to hear you got your account situation figured out, because you told me about that in Discord the other night. And I was like, dang. I was like, that sucks. That's happened to me once, and it freaked me out bigger than hell, and I raised hell over it, and they got it fixed. So I'm glad yours got fixed as well. But Danny said, good evening, Enforcers. Chef Danny here, and I'm very worried about this tariff situation. I mean, I lost my first business because of the whirlybird, and I just barely started my catering business, and I'm worried it's not going to work either. And honestly, Danny, like, I think most people that are self-employed or in business for themselves, those people are definitely worried about this because it could hit their business really hard, like your business. And of course, that's really scary because a lot of people work really hard, like yourself, to start businesses, and it really, should like shiver the timbers of the business owners to think that their business could collapse because of one stupid decision. But hopefully it doesn't. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I have to thank you for the support, Danny B, and I'd have to say that it is fairly concerning. I'll be entirely honest, we're fairly concerned about the future of this channel because many people will know that entertainment is one of the industries to get hit the hardest when it comes to any kind of economic calamity. And while we are news, we really are more so entertainment because the way our monetization structure works largely is more of an entertainment style structure than one of news, where we just have, say, sponsors or some sort of a larger financial backer that just makes sure that we can stay on air no matter what. We pretty much run like entertainment. Like if people enjoy this show, they can, like you enjoy the show, you can throw in a $20 super chat. But beyond that, if people's bottom line starts to get hit and their income gets hit, and they don't have that kind of expendable income to throw into this channel in super chats, we're going to be having a much harder time of it as well. And on top of that, things are going to be a lot more expensive. So that's something that's been a little bit concerning to me in the background because, our lease is coming around to expiring, so we're going to have to move somewhere and renew a new lease. And who's to say that, we might not have the income to even be able to afford a new lease, even if we try and make sure that it's manageable and affordable. Who's to say that that wouldn't be the case? So I do thank you for the support, but I completely understand the position that you're in because, we're kind of in the same position in the background, and, we just don't really talk about the financial stresses or worries of the channel because we don't want to burden everyone watching with that kind of a thing. But we honestly are almost in the same boat, that we're really concerned about that more so than anything. But still, with that, I hope that does address that well. And I thank you once again for support and help with this channel to keep on running, Danny B. And I hope that your catering business still continues on and does well. And so with that, thank you so much once again. Hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Scott Kemp, who puts in a 10 once again. And thank you, Scott Kemp, for the support. And I think I might have duplicated your super chat, or either you put in the same one twice. I'm not sure. I have a feeling I duplicated it. But thank you very much, Scott, for that support once again. And we appreciate it very much. And also, we had a 10 from Chargy. And thank you, Chargy, for that $10 support. And we appreciate it very much. He said, Enforcer Matt for president. Hey, look at that. I got another vote. I got 2 votes. They said, young people, please take the wheel. Honestly, the old people have had a crack at it. And, I'm not saying the old people are generally like, obtuse or anything like that. Like they've got wisdom. They've been around for ages. But, not every old person is what you'd call wise. They may have experience, but they may not be wise. So that's one thing. But a young person won't have as much experience as an old person. But young people, some of them might have a little bit more, I guess you could say, common sense, or the cogs are turning a little bit better is a kind way to put it. And maybe they could take the wheel and maybe drive the ship a little bit more on the straight and narrow, maybe. So, yeah, I mean, honestly, I would say give the young people a shot. If there's a young person out there that's willing to take it on and willing to go through the ringer of politics, because once again, that's a nasty game these days. They love to pull up everything about your past, anything stupid you might have ever done. They'll be blasting on a TV commercial and embarrassing the hell out of you. So if somebody's willing to take that on and do it, I say go for it. Maybe one day it'll be me or the Enforcer. There's no telling. I think the Enforcer is still going for it, I think. But Enforcer, what say you?
I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And hopefully we'll see something like that sometime in the future. But still, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Marin Ducostian, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you, Marin, for their support. They said, from Huntsville, with respect. And thank you, LSA.
Hey, and a big shout out to Huntsville, Alabama. A massive shout out for being an Alabamian. And I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because folks like you help to make this thing possible and make this thing a reality. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And let's see here. I was looking through the comments here. We're getting some interesting ones. Let's see. Someone said, how do you guys handle a breakup? It just hurts you, but I love y'all. Elsa, need you guys' advice. I thought that was like talking about Russia there for a minute. I was about to say, like, a breakup with who? I didn't know you meant like a breakup, like a personal one. Honestly, I'm probably not the person to ask for that, to be straight up honest. I'm not even going to lie on that one. So maybe the Enforcer has some advice, but I'm not the guy to ask. But Enforcer, what say you?
The only situation where I've kind of been in a thing like that, it was It wasn't really like a normal kind of a breakup thing. It was like, I don't even really think that would apply. And I don't really think that's something I want to talk about on air that much. But beyond that, I think we're going to skip that one. like, you know, the story. And I think we're going to skip that one because that might not be appropriate for the stream. But with that.
Yes. And also, by the way, I saw another comment, by the way, it was David Walters said, how about a mid-age person? That'll work too. I think the age to be the president is 35. They have a minimum age to be president, but they don't have a maximum age, which is kind of messed up because apparently the logic behind being the minimum age of 35 is they don't have enough experience if you're younger than 35 to run for president. But also at the same time, it's like, shouldn't we have a cap like at 75 or 70 years old or something like that? Because at some point faculties start to go, and mainly the brain. Like you start losing your intellectual capacities when you start getting really, really old, like extremely old. And that's just a fact of life. That's just human biology. So a mid-aged person would work. I think that's pretty much all that could run really is a mid-aged person.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, it would have to be because, you know, you can only be 35 to run for president. So by the time you actually have a shot at it, you're almost middle-aged at that point. Well, you are middle-aged at that point, technically. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in Matthew's quote-unquote opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Danny B once again, and this time he puts in a 20, and thank you very much, Danny, for the second support of the night. He said, Chef Danny again, and it's also a good thing I did run headfirst in my catering business. I'm still working full-time at the social house, so just in case something did happen.
And I thank you for the support, Danny B. And it is a good thing to just get out there and try and hit the ground running and hopefully succeed. And also, of course, it's good to hear that you don't have all of your eggs in one basket and we'll be fine. Us, however, all of our eggs are in one basket, which is this YouTube channel. So if this doesn't work, we have to figure out something and fast. But still, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that well. And thank you for helping this channel to keep on running. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and moving on here to our next one. This one is going to go to, let's see here. Let me reorganize my spreadsheet real quick because it's gotten out of whack. So let me do that. Sort range A to Z. There we go. Old fashioned. But anyways, this one is going to go to Jenna, last name Tolls, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Jenna, for that $10 support. They said, there's no point in giving the facts. I quit trying weeks ago. It's too much politics for them.
Well, I thank you so much for the support and helping the channel to keep on running. It's a shame how it works these days. It really is. Like, I'm not going to go on a giant rant about it again. But it is a shame how things work. Like, you know, being pro-Ukrainian at the start was its own thing, you know, and of course we knew that there was a lot of misinformation and propaganda out there being put out by the Russians. But dealing with it in a domestic sense, where you can actually see that sometimes presidents do things that are not in the best interest of the country, and it's just clearly not in the best interest of the United States. It's not going to end up well. And, you know, you try and say something about it, and then people want to act like you're an enemy of America because you're looking out for their own well-being. It's a little bit weird. Like, I don't really know how to work with it. And, you know, and I would like to not talk about it, but it's such a big thing. Like we cannot really talk about what's going on in Europe without talking about the tariffs, because the tariffs really do play a big part in how Europe is going to be operating with the United States into the future. It also has a big deal with what Canada is going to be doing, because Canada is trying to move under the nuclear umbrella of the United Kingdom and France because they're scared of the United States because we impose tariffs on them. And there's also a considerable fear that the United States might annex Canada in the future. And then Mexico on the other hand, we're trying to float the idea of invading northern Mexico to deal with the cartels, and also they're our largest trading partner at this point in terms of imports and exports. So it's like, I believe Canada is, but Mexico is a very close second. So it's like you really cannot talk about any of this without talking about the tariffs and stuff. But it really, honestly, I'm just tired of talking about it, because it's like, you know, we talk about it, people cuss us out, they unsubscribe, and it really doesn't matter what we do, because if we were trying to be as neutral as possible about it, because Matthew does that in his videos that we seldom get to make because there's not really enough news to talk about, and also for some reason some people are really two-dimensional, and when we don't have good news to report and we still try to report it to them, they take it out on us that the news isn't good, like a bunch of spoiled brats. So, you know, it's like, you know, at this point, we really are kind of like in a lose-lose at this point. No matter what we do, people are just going to be incredibly unhappy, and they're going to try and take it out on us for some reason when we're just trying to get them the news. So with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well. Thank you once again for support, and we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one goes to Bob Dole, who's back once again, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Bob Dole, for the $10 support. We appreciate that. And Bob said, the Dole deal, let's see, remove all tariffs and only place one on water. The Earth is at least 40% water, so we would make so much money. Honestly, that logic right there sounds vaguely reminiscent of what I've been hearing for the last couple of months. But I said, please take a live chat question.
And I got to thank you so much for your support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. But an interesting idea. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the live chat question goes to Avro, who says, do you think that this new civil war in Syria, being Russia-Iran backed, is an attempt to divert attention from Iran's nuclear program?
I don't really think so, because this is most likely going to just become another internal matter inside of Syria. I think it's actually an attempt to try and bring Syria entirely back under their control, because they're thinking that Jelani may be a wild card or a questionable leader. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion, and thank you once again for support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Amrid, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Am, for the support as well. And they said, you guys are very informative and fair, especially on the issue of the tariffs in place on the U.S. due to having different manufacturing standards. And maybe we should all agree on a single global standard.
Oh, well, actually, there is. There is a World Trade Organization, and there's, I think, a flat rate 2.5% tariff across the board. It's an incredibly low one, but there is something like that already. I do thank you so much for the support, though, and I appreciate that you really like our stance on it. And of course, folks like you help to make this thing possible and keep it running. And so with that, thank you so much once again. Hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Destiny Edgington, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Destiny, for that support. Also, by the way, put in a super sticker of the YouTube lemon creature, and it's jumping around, and it looks scared, and its heart is pumping out of his chest. He could be having a heart attack, or he could be surprised or happy. I'm honestly getting mixed signals from that. But thank you very much, Destiny, for that support, and we appreciate it. Enforcer, what say you?
When life gives you lemons, you get cardiac arrest. Get an ambulance. But beyond that, thank you so much.
I think he's having a coronary.
Oh, no. Oh, man. Did someone say core? Oh, man. But anyways, beyond that, I do thank you so much for your support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so with that, thank you once again. Hope that this addressed that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to United Kempo Martial Arts Academy once again, who puts in the 10. And thank you very much, United Kempo, once more for that support. They said, do you think Europe can step up at the same level as the U.S. helped in the past? Are they militarily capable to expand their own military and help Ukraine at the same time?
I think we already addressed that one before, like word for word almost.
I think they put it in twice then.
Oh, well, I do thank you so much for the support. I believe we actually already answered your super chat. I think it was the exact same one a little bit earlier. But I do thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. Also, spring is back, said in the live chat. Said, Enforcer Matt, who wants to run for president and get the rest of your life destroyed if you're young? Honestly, like, unless you were squeaky clean, like you've never done a thing wrong in your life, they are going to pull up everything possible on you and try to get every little scrap of dirt possible. Because remember, there's a lot of money behind these presidential campaigns, and they hire people to go do investigations to the other side to try to find dirt on them. Also, they contact people that you might have known. They get people like, they can get family members to come out and say stuff about you, friends that you've had falling outs with. They'll be dragging them on to CNN and Fox to try to slander you. I mean, it's nasty. I mean, there's no like restraint at all these days as to what's off limits. It's all out there. Even if your parents did something, they'll be dragging that in too. It's just honestly like that. I think that deters a lot of people from running for politics because they're like, hell, I'm not going out there. Like, you know, nobody's perfect. Everybody's made mistakes, and they're going to literally start blaring those mistakes over the television to 350 million people. So, you know, that's just not appealing to most people. I don't know who the hell that would be appealing to. Some people just don't care because some people have no shame. Like they've done something, they get drug up into the public. They're like, hell, I don't care. I don't, you know, I'll do it anyway. I'll do what I want. But, you know, most people are like, I really don't want that trouble. So they just don't run. But anyways, jumping into our next super chat, this one goes to Esteban Graves, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Esteban, for the support. And Enforcer, what say you?
And thank you so much for the support, Esteban. It's folks like you that keep the LSA running. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
And this one, it goes to Nightmare Before Christmas, who puts in a 9. And thank you very much, Nightmare Before Christmas, for the support. They said, LSA, and glad you survived another storm, LOL. And can we get a question?
Hey, and thank you so much for the support. We did survive another storm, and we will make sure to get a question from the chat. So what do we got, Matthew?
And this question is going to go to Scott Morris, who says, so do you think we should be thanking Israel for destroying all that military equipment in rocket factories instead of condemning them inside of Syria?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting question. I really don't know how that would have affected it. I mean, maybe that all would have been absorbed by the Syrian interim government and they would have been able to put down these rebels. Because at this point, I don't really know who's worse, the rebels going against the rebels or the rebels in charge. Who's to say? But that could have helped them to crush the other rebel forces. But at this point, it's really hard to say whether that was a good move or not yet. I think we'll only be able to see in the wash, depending on what this other rebel group is like and what they're actually looking for. Because what they're stating could be entirely different than their actual intentions. So with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well, at least in my opinion. I think it wants to give her support and help this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Jason Curling, who puts in a 6. And thank you, Jason, as well for that support. He said, I can't wait to see what will happen in the Greenland election, March 11th. And LSA, love your work.
Hey, and thank you so much for supporting and helping this channel to keep on running. And I wonder what will happen in Greenland. There's only I think 50,000 voters. So I wonder what will happen with that. That'll be interesting. But still, thank you once again for support. Hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
A new candidate just made their way onto the Greenland ballot. Anyways, jumping into our next one. This one goes to Peter Florence, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Peter, as well for that support. And also, big shout out to Gary Klinghofer, who put in a 5 also. And they said, LSA.
Hey, and LSA. And thank you to all of you for the support and help with this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it rolling. And so a huge thanks to both of y'all once again. And we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Philip Fixes LSA, who puts in a 5. And thank you, Philip, as well, for being a longtime channel legend and supporting the channel. Hey. And he said, a new segment. He said, I saw a train, a CSX 4310, and care to look up its liveries. If not, I've got a good hood review. Orlando, Hiawassee, and Silver Star. Slava LSA.
And let me go see if I can get CSX 4310. And let's see, I think what you're talking about here is a GP39. It looks like a GP39. It seems to me to be a GP39, and I'm not really seeing a really exclusive or wait a minute, hang on, is this it? Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute, hang on, hold up. Is this a heritage locomotive of? Huh, it looks like it is. Let me go see if I can get this for you. So this is I think CSX 4310. I think. Let me check that. I don't see a CSX identifier on this thing like it is 4310, and it has like a heritage livery on it for Rock Island, the Rock Island Railroad. It's just that I don't know, I don't know if this one's CSX, because I was getting a lot more different results up here, like this CSX 4310, which is just a dark future liveried GP38, so GP39. So it's not really like that neat. So I'm guessing that you're talking about this one, which is actually a pretty cool livery. For some folks who may not know, this is, I think, a heritage unit that's supposed to reference the Rock Island Railroad. Honestly, I think this livery was incredibly cool. It's actually really unique. But the Rock Island Railroad collapsed a little bit, back in the past, and it ended up merging later on, I believe, with CSX. I think CSX is the company that did merge with Rock Island Railroad eventually.
Bankrupt. It went bankrupt? I'm sorry. That was the best railroad the world's ever seen. It only had a reorganization, that's all.
Actually, I don't think that this merged with CSX, because this is more so Union Pacific territory. So let me go see. Let's see here. It ran up until, let's see, Chicago Commuter Service, Survival Challenge. So it was merged. Well, hang on. It wasn't merged with Union Pacific. Oh, yeah, this is when they rebranded to the Rock instead of Rock Island Railroad. And then when did they merge? Let's see. Train battle, cars and locomotives. So let's see. That is a... Dang, it's really... For some reason, I'm forgetting the entire history of the Rock Island Railroad for some weird reason.
Didn't Dwayne Johnson used to hold a stake in that?
Yeah, he was the Rock. He was the CEO.
Yeah.
They named the whole thing after him. But yeah, this is a... I don't know if this is a CSX train. That's the thing. It says it's 4310. I just don't know if it's CSX's. Wait a minute. Are you talking about the Chessiv Systems 4310? Are you talking about this one? Because I know that would be a CSX thing. Let me go see CSX 4310 livery. Let me put that in. Maybe we can get... Well, it's going back to the Rock Island Railroad. I'll be honest with you, the search results on this thing is incredibly confusing. But as far as CSX heritage units, because I can talk about those just in a blanket statement. Heritage units are incredibly cool to me. Most railroads have them these days, and they usually are a reference to a company that eventually merged with them or they absorbed at some point. So CSX has a lot of them, like Pan Am Railways. Y'all probably thought that Pan Am never had a railway, but crazily enough, Pan Am started as an airline and then eventually created a railway. So that is actually a part of CSX in the modern day. They also had the North Carolina, I forgot what this is. It's the North Carolina and something Railroad. I never really cared that much about it, so the livery's neat, though. It looks a lot like the Pennsylvania Railroad in a way with, like, that Tuscan red. And then you have the Georgia Railroad, and then you have Western Maryland. This one's actually pretty striking looking, in my opinion. And then there is my favorite. Oh, yeah, by the way, there's Seaboard Coastline, which is a pretty interesting one. And there is the Chessiv System one. Honestly, this one was done pretty, like, sloppily. But still, Chessiv System's neat. I love the Chessiv System livery. But the one that's the coolest to me, and let me see if I can find it. It's not really photographed much. It's the Louisville and Nashville one. Well, actually, they have Seaboard, too. Which is really cool. But I'm wanting to find the Louisville and Nashville one. They have to have it somewhere in here. Here we go. There it is. The Louisville and Nashville one. I really like the Louisville and Nashville because it's originally the railroad of Alabama. It was Southern Railway and Louisville and Nashville pretty much that just had the run of the gamut at Alabama. So this is pretty much our railroad. And there was the Gulf of Mobile in Ohio and like a couple of others, but they don't count. I don't count them. But this is a really cool livery to me because I just think the Louisville and Nashville kind of a thing, it's neat. Like, you don't really see a lot of locomotives out there in gray with yellow text. Like, Kansas City Southern is the only thing that ever came close, and honestly, I didn't like the way they did it. It looked ugly. So the L&N is really cool to me. They called it the Dixie Line or Old Reliable. Those were the nicknames of the railroad. But still pretty neat. Unfortunately, though, I could not find 3410, unless if it was the Rock. If it was, I like that livery. It's pretty neat. But honestly, I actually, if any liveries I like, Norfolk Southern heritage units. Let me go show y'all those. Because they did it all the way. Like, they didn't just do, like, the back 2/3 of the locomotives or engines. They did the whole thing. So, like, the nickel plate road, ES44, like, really cool. I really like it. But let me see if I can go find that. Oh, yeah, this is a model of it. But this is the heritage unit for Southern Railway. Bussin'. Like, I think that just looks so cool. And also, they had a couple of others. They have New York Central. That's a pretty cool one. They have, I think that's the Erie and Lackawanna right there. Yeah, that is the Lackawanna, the Erie and Lackawanna. Pretty cool livery. And then they also have the Pennsylvania Railroad right there. And honestly, man, I'm not going to lie, the Pennsylvania Railroad's livery on modern engines just looks very good, very clean.
It looks interesting. It's okay.
Matthew doesn't like it. He's hiding that. He's about to be like, I hate it. It's ugly. Well, what about Lehigh Valley?
Do you want me to stay family friendly, or do you want me to be honest?
Be honest.
This thing ain't it.
All right. Well, how about this one? Illinois Terminal.
What's it supposed to be, like a play on Coca-Cola Sprite or something like that? What is this lime green junk?
It's a Sprite cranberry like on the rails.
Coca-Cola advertising on wheels, is it?
Pretty much. I mean, like, honestly. But let's see. How about the Reading Lines livery? You like that one?
Beeline service. What are they trying to do? Get in the comedy game with this? Their career's over before it began.
All right. Matthew's being brutal tonight. How about the Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia Railway?
Alabama?
Yeah.
What are they typing on Alabama for? Eh? How's the Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia? If you're Alabama all the way. Roll Tide.
Okay, all right. Matthew is a very hard one to please today. Like, this is getting rough. How about the Union Pacific heritage units? I think you'd like those better. I think you'd like them better a little bit. How about the Northwestern Railroad?
Northwestern Railroad. Their logo looks like they're about to sell some burgers or something on a hamburger stand. Like, what is this, a railroad or a food company?
Okay, okay, all right. How about Southern Pacific?
Man, what's this thing teetering on a bridge or something? Why's it about to flip over?
It was on a bridge. I mean, it's like, yeah.
Man, I'm just trying to roast it. That's all. That was a lame roast on that one, though.
Well, what about the Rio Grande, the Denver and Rio Grande?
Honestly, that's not a bad one. I kind of do like that one, actually.
Dude, honestly, man, I want to get like a model of that. That actually looks really cool. Here's a model of it actually right there. Well, actually, that's Lego. That's Lego.
Lego? I mean,
yeah, look at that.
No, man, there's no way that's Lego. That's the too detailed for Lego.
No. That is Lego, dude. Look, you can see the little Lego sprigs on those things down there. This is a Lego train.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, if that's Lego, Lego's upped its game here recently.
Well, I mean, it's made of Legos, but I don't think it's like a Lego kit or anything like that. But let me see if I can find you. I don't even know what railroad that. Oh, it was the Missouri-Kansas terminal one. I've never seen that livery on any of their trains. I think they just made that one up. Like, maybe I'm wrong. But let's see here. Any other interesting ones? Actually, Union Pacific doesn't have many of these, do they? You know, one company that I haven't even heard of making heritage units is BNSF. Oh yeah, they just have those shitty old Santa Fe's, and I guess they count those as their heritage units. Like, dude,
man, it looks good. That's one right there. I would recognize from anywhere. I actually like that one.
Well, I mean, like, this thing is beat to hell. Like, these are the paint jobs that these locomotives had back in like 1990 when Burlington Northern and Santa Fe merged, and they just never gave it a new livery. So this thing has had this livery for like 30 something years at a minimum.
Huh? I mean, I like it. I think it's pretty good.
Well, I love the war bonnets. Here's one that's fresh, like fresher. Like, I like that.
I really don't like BNSF, like their logo, like on that orange train back there, like their actual modern logo. It looks like, I don't know. It looks like the logo bottle would be on the side of like a pesticide killer or something like that. You'd find in like Home Depot. It's like that.
You know, I'm not gonna lie, man. You know what these things remind me of? Candy corn.
Candy corn. Yeah, maybe.
You know, same color kind of a scheme. Like, I don't know. Like, it was the reason why they went with orange though is because the mix of green and red, I think creates orange, if I'm correct. And so it was supposed to be like a mix of the two companies' colors because Burlington Northern was green and Santa Fe was red, or at least like their war bonnet was red. So when you mix the two together, you get orange, and that's why they're orange. But I really liked the BNSF executive livery. Have you ever seen that before?
The executive livery? No, I haven't seen that.
It's this one.
Well, that doesn't look that executive. I'll be honest with you. That doesn't look that good.
Kind of looks like a Nike shoe.
A Nike shoe. Maybe.
Maybe. Like, this wasn't the favorite of a lot of people. But it actually, like, in my opinion, looks better, at least in this, like, bright fluorescent orange.
Did they have, like, a Ferrari train?
Man, that's a good question. I don't know.
Punch it in. I bet they've done something like that. Somebody's done it. Ferrari train. No way.
Oh, wow, it's an Italian high-speed train.
Ferrari actually built this?
I don't think so. It's just like a Ferrari style kind of a thing. It's an Italian high-speed train, though. It does look pretty good.
You know, I just realized that I actually kind of like trains after all. Like, this is actually like a nice train here. Now, this is like what trains should be. Is like this one right here. I like it.
Well, you know, one train that I think is a little bit interesting is the Alstom Avelia Liberty. Look at this thing. It's French.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. I kind of like that Ferrari train better, but yeah, this one's pretty good.
I'm not gonna lie, man. I don't think they cooked on the livery on this one. Like, I think they could have made it a little bit better. Honestly, man, in my honest opinion, I think they did better with the Acela, the Acela Express, or the, let's see. Nah, we don't want to do the Acela Avelia. We just want to do the Acela. I think they did better with this one's livery than the Alstom Avelias, in my opinion. I just like.
But between the old one and the new one, I'll be honest, I do like that new one.
I do like the new one and its shape and design. I think they just could have done a better job, a better design with the paint job, you know?
I kind of like it, actually. It's kind of fresh looking. Looks modern and hip instead of that old, like, dank one.
But, dude, this thing's a legend.
It may be a legend, but that paint, They ought to wash these trains up a little bit more often.
Man, but that thing is clean. Look at that. I mean, that's like fresh. That's like minty fresh right there. Look at that. Like that's minty fresh.
Maybe so. Maybe
Not
so.
even a bird strike on that thing, dude. Usually you have like some blood splatter in the front of this thing from some goofy bird that goes flying in front of it when it's going like 150. Like, man, those smears can get huge from some of those birds, especially the bigger they are. But beyond that, though,
man, imagine if you hit a vulture with that thing.
Good
geez.
Lord, dude, man, that would be like chicken nuggets, like instant delivery right there. If you hit a vulture with that. Golly, man. Like,
I can't stand those vultures, though. Like, honestly, it would be nasty on the train car, but if they could smash a vulture or two, like, I wouldn't be opposed.
Man, don't be dissing on those vultures. I'll tell you one train I do like, though, that's electric, that isn't like a multiple unit, the ACS 64.
Yes. Also, by the way, we got, like, super jets left, by the way. Like, we've got some in the spreadsheet.
Oh, dang, really?
Yeah.
Also, someone said, what about MKT? MKT, not bad, but my counter to that is just Burlington Northern as it was. Let me go see, before we move on to him, let me go get Burlington Northern. This paint job, this green with that white. I don't like the car body thing that they had going on with this one. Let me go get y'all like a normal one. Burlington Northern's green had it going on. For some reason, I just find that visually pleasing. Like, I don't know if Matthew will disagree with me on that one, but I like them.
Too simplistic. I don't like it.
I can't win for shit. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on to the remainder of the question. How many do we have left, Matthew?
About 15.
Oh, well, that's actually a pretty decent amount. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Drew H0208, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Drew H, for that support, and we appreciate it very much. And Drew said, Enforcer, when you retire, how deep will you go down the Grand Paul model train setup rabbit hole? Indoor HO, outdoor G, rideable live stream, fiberglass mountains, loving the streams. And how about Matt? Me personally, I would say I'm in the model car game. I'm not in the model train game, and I probably won't ever be, to be honest with you. Not that I hate it. I mean, it's pretty neat, I will say. Actually, I got a train car for Andrew for his birthday when it came around. So I've actually gone around and looked at the train models, and they're pretty neat, but I just personally wouldn't invest that much money in them. But Enforcer, what say you?
He got me, it wasn't this is like O-gauge. He got me a Frisco boxcar, which I was a big fan of, because I always wanted a Frisco Railways boxcar. It's literally this one, exactly. Well, actually, no, the logo, like, backing, the facing was black. It was this one.
There it is right there. Yeah, that's it right there.
Well, no, actually, the text over there is different. It said shipping on the Frisco, just like this, with a Frisco logo just like that. Actually, I think this is it. Because no, it wasn't, because yours was like an 8th unit and this is an Intermountain. Whatever. Anyways, it was this one, pretty much. He got me that. I was a huge fan of it. Always wanted a Frisco Railways boxcar. He got it for me. I was like, that's really cool. But when I become a grandpa, I'm going to be like one of those little like Empire layout kind of people. I would do HO scale. Like, I don't really care if they're rideable. I really just like the operations of the railroad more so than like actually feeling like I'm driving the train. And like not to diss on the people who do that, but if you're not doing live steam with that kind of like a rideable steam thing, it's just not really that cool. Like the live steam thing is so cool when you can actually ride the things, but then you're like talking about like $100,000 for one engine to ride around on, and then that's just too expensive. So I would do the little HO thing and just have like a basement layout that's massive, because I like the idea of having like loads of little industries and loads of trackage to run these things around. And of course, it would be a Louisville and Nashville layout. I'm going to die on Louisville and Nashville stuff. So with that, thank you so much for the support and help with this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Brian Gonzalez, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Brian, as well for that support. He said, have you seen Denny's channel? And today, there's a video about how the United States gets a piece of Ukraine, whether or not it takes a side either with Putin or Zelensky, and it explains why he defaults to Putin.
Thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I haven't seen that video from Dennis Davido. He actually comes over here and watches our show from time to time. He's pretty nice. He's one of the folks that we actually appreciate in this section. But beyond that, I haven't seen his video, but he's probably not wrong on that either way, I mean, to be entirely honest. But still, thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to United Kempo Martial Arts Academy once again, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, United Kempo, once again. They said, is anyone keeping tabs on how many donkeys have been taken out? And only ones on the Russian side I care about are the donkeys.
We haven't heard about any donkeys being taken out at all at this point, and we haven't seen anyone trying to keep track of the numbers either. So unfortunately, I'd have to say we'd have to declare ignorance on that at this time. But still, thank you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Darren Quinn, who puts in a 5. And huge shout out to Darren for the $5 support. He said, check out Mallee Fowl Nesting, Australia. We have lots where I live. Compost nest the parents. What? Also check temperature in nest and move egg accordingly.
And how do you spell that?
M-A-L-E-E, fowl, a nest.
How do you spell fowl?
F-O-W-L.
Oh, it was one word. Okay, all right. Let's go here. So this is what I got. It's somewhere near Perth. Is it Malleefowl Way or like is it just Malleefowl? What is it, man? What is? Oh, wait, hang on.
He put it in his 2 words. He said Malleefowl Nesting, Australia.
Nesting. Let me go see. Okay, I guess we're just gonna have to pull this up on like Google. So. Let's take a gander here. What is this bird? This is a bird.
It looks like a pheasant bird.
Here it is, the Malleefowl. Honestly, man, that thing like looks like a mix of prehistoric and like pheasant. Yeah, it really does, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does have that pheasant look.
Man, that pheasant bird. Like,
yeah, I was thinking that too. Bringing Gomer Pyle for the pheasant bird.
Man, we gonna go catch ourselves a pheasant. But beyond that, that's apparently there's sand insulation, rotting compost, and then eggs in the egg chamber. That's actually pretty unique, actually. I thank you for sharing that. And I have to say that the eggs do be in their chamber like that. But beyond that, I gotta say thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And of course, thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on being possible. If it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing running. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to David Walter, who puts in a 5. And thank you, David, as well, for the support once more. He said, aren't tariffs used midterm to see results? I think Canada, Mexico, and China all at the same time was aggressive. And I think it might be a game of chicken, question mark.
It is a game of chicken. The thing is that the game of chicken would have been far more successful if we just did it one at a time. Doing it all at the same time, it's too bold, too audacious, will not work. And now, of course, I'm not saying that as a supporter of the president's plan or an opponent of the president's plan. I'm just saying that from aspect of trying to make what he's doing work, that was far too aggressive and far too ambitious, and we're going to pay the price for it at this point. So, if anything, the person who's going to be feeling the burn the most from this action is going to be the United States, because we're dealing with this on 4 fronts. So we're going to have to be the one to chicken first, really, at this point. Otherwise, we suffer untold economic consequences. But with that, thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Marc-Andre Burnett, who put in a 4, along with Jason Curling, who put in a 3. And thank you very much to Mark and Jason for that support. Also, we had a 3 from David Walter, as well as a 2 from Blazat, a 2 from Andy L, and also a 1 from Leora Avagile. And Leora, I don't know why I can't remember how to pronounce your last name tonight, but please forgive me. I know one of them is wrong, so I went with both to play it safe. But thank you very much to all 5 of you for that support, and we appreciate it very much. And also, we have one last super chat, and this one goes to Krusty Hen, who put in a 3 and says, hi from Australia.
Hello, and a big hello to Australia, the land down under. We just looked at your bird, and that bird looked like a pheasant bird. But beyond that, thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on into the live chats, I believe. And Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping straight into our live chat questions, we have our Morse code decoders of the stream. Tonight, we had all of them. Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Benu, Kevin J., Paul Schultz, Dave Millsap, Roy Fluffness, Arabelle Garbo, Joni Dog, and Norm Pritchett. They said the Morse code for the day. It says, I guess we don't have to worry about Jelani because the whole place is going up. LLT, LSA.
And ding, that's the sound of money. And y'all got that dead on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. I got to congratulate y'all greatly for getting that correct. It's a really impressive thing that y'all have. And once again, I got to say, Really, really incredible stuff. 1,107 days in the war. I'll continue to surprise. But with that, it is time for us to get on into our live chat questions. And due to time constraints, we will unfortunately only be getting 3. And so with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one is going to go to the Sunken Grave, who says, is the U.S. dollar now in danger of being supplanted as the world's reserve currency?
I don't think it is yet. I actually think that would take several decades to have that happen. That's largely what happened with the pound sterling. It really took about a couple of decades for the dollar to become the main reserve currency, because before the dollar, the pound sterling was in the exact same spot in the United Kingdom, and that takes decades for that sort of a thing to happen. So I would say if it happens, it's going to honestly be probably by the time I'm about 50. So with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well, and we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Aussie Matty, the Australian version of Matt. I don't know, but thank you very much for that support. Or what the hell? My brain, it gets tired around this time of night. But thank you very much, Aussie Matty, for that question. They said, do we believe that it's now confirmed that Chinese soldiers are within Russia and Ukraine and not just mercenaries?
They are still mercenaries only at this point, but we have heard an idea floated around by the Chinese that they may actually send the People's Liberation Army in support of the Russian Federation in the Ukraine war, but then also they shot down the President of the United States peace plan today with Ukraine, saying that it was really screwing Ukraine over. So I have no clue what the Chinese are doing at this point, rather than just trying to sow confusion and just nonsensical shenanigans at this point. So with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so who is the lucky last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And this one goes to Tony Lunatic Kane. He said, keep this in mind. Since the 1920s, the Middle East has been in some sort of conflict. And why should we as Americans want to go back to another Middle Eastern conflict?
Hi, they haven't been in conflict since the 20s. That's outrageous. That's crazy. Well, I mean, Europe's always been in conflict. Since, like, forever. The world's always in conflict, to be entirely honest. So, to say that somewhere's been in conflict for a while, it's not, and also, it doesn't really matter if they've been in conflict for a while. If we have an interest there, if there's something we are getting out of that region, we kind of just have to be there, whether it's a conflicted region or not. But I would say the reason why to get into it is because we're trying to make sure that this region at least remains somewhat aligned towards the United States or towards our interests. If we allow for the region to just continue to descend into largely an Iranian-aligned region, it's going to end up by de facto becoming controlled by the Chinese. And then all of the oil assets and resources are directly controlled by China and not by us. That's really the major issues. That's why we kind of want to get involved in all the conflicts in this area and continue to slug it out here in the sandpit, is because the sandpit has a massive amount of repercussions on what happens worldwide. So I hope that does address that somewhat well, at least in my opinion. But with that, it is time for us to round out tonight's stream. I thank you all so much once again for watching. It has been an absolute honor and a pleasure to be able to run the stream for each and every one of y'all. And if y'all have enjoyed, please, I beg of you, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We run this stream day in and day out. I got to thank the 3,000 people who hit the like button so far. Really happy to see it. Love to see it. And of course, we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news of the wire in Ukraine. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe. Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And thank you all once again for another fantastic stream once again tonight with a ton of news to cover. And I'm sure, of course, that tomorrow will be another big news day as well, because things are popping off in the Middle East. They're popping off between the United States and Ukraine. They're popping off in China, and they're popping off everywhere. Things are happening all over the place. It's crazy times, and there's plenty of news to cover. So be sure to join us again tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern for our next nightly war news stream. And also, maybe, just maybe, midday tomorrow for a short war video if there is enough news to cover midday. And we can't make any guarantees about that, because these days the news is coming out closer to the stream instead of the video time. So most of the times we don't get a chance to make a video unless it comes out really early. So with that, folks, once again, Slava Ukraine, Hero Slava, get some rest, and good night.